Salutations, Legion of Doom. Welcome to Podcast The Storm, where socially awkward outcasts, crazy weirdos, and all around nerds convene to talk and debate all things pop culture. With me, as always, is my co host, the nerdy occultist, aka the Authenticator, Dalton L. Mortimer.
Hello everyone. It is the last show of January, which means we've made it 1/12 of the way through 2024 already. Which is surreal to me.
I'm your host, Last Time Lord Wannabe, the brainstorm of pop culture. How's everyone doing tonight?
I'm doing well because I actually managed to eat something before showtime today. Which is as I'm sure Brainstormer knows, is quite a rarity. I usually wait until after the show before I eat anything. Which is probably humorous for the audience because it usually results in me getting hangry after a certain point.
I just assumed that was your natural state.
I mean, it is, especially when one is dealing with stupidity, but I'm sure the hangriness doesn't hurt things.
I mean, to be fully honest, Dalton, and I say this as your friend, like true friend here. Um, your personality is just always bitchy.
This is also true.
All right. Most of this stuff Dalton sent me this week, except for the last thing, and we'll get to that.
Which would have been sent by one of us no matter what happened, because
Oh yeah, no, obviously.
literally as soon as I saw it, I was going to send it, and you beat me to it. Was the only thing that happened.
Oh, and it always
So
seems to work that way. But yeah, okay. So we're gonna start with this first one. This is from wargamer.com. Only Games Workshop. I assume, yeah, that's what it means, right?
mhm.
Only Games Workshop can banish Warhammer 40K's gender demons for good.
At which point they will probably fail because that is the core of their customer base.
Okay. And just so I just want to make sure something real quick. Yeah. So this was written by Alex Adam. No, not Alex Evans. Sorry. Yeah, it was published Jan. And it just says 2 weeks on this. Uh, yeah, January 14th, 2024.
Mm-hmm.
I'm obviously using the archive version, just
Mostly so that pop-up ads aren't a thing,
mhm.
because on a lot of these websites, after about the third or fourth article they show you for free, they keep insisting that you pay for their content, and
Yeah,
the answer is no.
yeah. Okay, so let me restart that again, just so I give everyone a clear context of this. So
Mhm.
again, it's from wargamer.com. Only Workshop can banish Warhammer 40K's gender demons for good, or daemons for good. It's written by Alex Evans, published January 14th, 2024.
Mhm.
Um, Subheader is Female Space Marines Don't Matter, but an ideological backlash against the idea could drag the Warhammer community into dark places.
Okay, here's the thing. Here's the thing. If your argument is going to be it doesn't matter, so why not let us change it? I would counter that argument with the idea of if it doesn't matter, why not leave it alone? And if it matters enough to change it, it also matters enough to defend from being changed in the first place. I.e., if it's important enough to change, it's important enough to leave alone. And if it's not important at all, then why are you spending so much time to change it rather than just letting the people who enjoy it as is enjoy it as is? moving on.
Right. There's something rotten in the state of Warhammer 40k. Even as Games Workshop's most successful creation continues to grow, recruiting new fans and breaking sales records left, right, and center, it still suffers from an old wound that refuses to heal and reopens every few months to gout foul, toxified blood once again. I mean, I would argue. I mean, yeah, it is kind of in a rotten state. I'm gonna be fully honest on that.
I mean, for the love of God, Warhammer 40k is a dystopian universe. It would be kind of weird if there wasn't something rotten in the state of it. But they don't mean in
No,
universe. They mean in the fan base, which is the issue.
I was referring to the holders of the IP, Games Workshop. Covered before, like, I think it was last year we did that. But the ban on fans.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, where basically anyone. What was it again? I remember that was. I can't remember the details. It's been a while. I don't like. Not a ban, but basically they assist for all people who were working on like Warhammer fan content, like Prova Alpha Boost says text to speech. What if the Emperor had text to speech device, or a lot of the fan animations that were done. So they stuff, which arguably, from what I've heard, is quality.
Yeah, GW has a similar problem that a lot of holders of IPs have, which seems to be that they hate their own fan base. And that they've been convinced either from their own internal issues or through other people trying to convince them that their fan base is toxic and that they have to be the quote-unquote adults in the room and take away the toys from all the naughty people. Which it never works, for one thing, and for another thing, it's not true in the first place. There isn't this toxic aspect of the fandom. What you have is you have a bunch of people who are newcomers to the IP trying to incentivize changes to the IP, and you have people who are loyal to the IP as it was being understandably annoyed at the people trying to change the IP. Because for some reason, with a lot of these newcomers, it's not enough to simply have a headcanon or a fan fiction or, in the privacy of their own gaming space, painting their miniatures however they want to paint them. They have to be acknowledged by the halls of GW's official canon. And as a result, you have people who like the canon as it was complaining that there's no good reason in universe to change the IP. The only reason you would change the IP to please these casuals and newcomers is because for some reason it's not enough for them to simply have their own headcanons or their own fan fiction. They have to insist that their headcanons and fan fictions be made the actual canon, thereby pissing off all the longer and more rigorous fans who have existed for far longer, who wanted the IP to remain however it was originally proposed. And that seems to happen every time there is a new IP or an IP becomes popular enough to be considered a popular thing. You have people who come in and rather than enjoy the IP as it is, they insist that their headcanons and fan fictions be made actual canon, thereby alienating people who like the thing as it was and for its own sake, on its own terms. Moving on, though.
Right. Okay. If you've ever spent more than 5 minutes in Warhammer 40k's online communities, especially within the last few months, you won't need me to tell you that this open, festering wound is specifically it's manifested in the question of whether Games Workshop should introduce female Space Marines into official 40K.
That question only ever gets raised by people who want to change the canon so that female Space Marines can be a thing. The problem is that within the canon of 40k, the gene seed, which is basically the genetic template for all Space Marines, is used on men because the mutations of the Space Marines can only do so much to augment existing physiology, and as a result, because men generally have, denser bone structure, denser muscular structure, etc., men make better soldiers, and thereby also make better super soldiers. That doesn't mean that women are not permitted within the armies of the Emperor. There are plenty of female just soldiers of the Imperium, and there are plenty of female sisters of battles who are basically sacred battle nuns of the Imperium. Why is it that it's not good enough to simply have female Imperium soldiers in every other regiment and in the Sisters of Battle? Why do you insist that the Imperium should waste its genetic resources on soldiers who would be physiologically inferior by definition? Because even if you gave both a female and a male gene seed, the augmentations of the gene seed would only augment their physiology so far. And as a result, the female Space Marines, if there were any, would be categorically weaker than the male Space Marines. Now, you could offset this by wasting more gene seed on the women, but gene seed is a remarkably rare resource in universe, and its augmentations only go so far, and we don't even know what stacking gene seed on top of gene seed would do. So why would the Imperium, which is a fallen empire basically, waste an incredibly valuable technological and genetic resource on equalizing the distance between men and women when it could just choose the best of the men and then augment those? And that's the other thing. It's not even that all men can become Space Marines. The process of becoming a Space Marine is an incredibly physiologically taxing transformation that most of the subjects who are selected for it don't even survive. So, in the event that the Imperium decided to make female Space Marines, which it has no reason to in universe, it would have to waste twice the amount of gene seed, or at least a significantly more percentage of gene seed, to bring up female Space Marines to standard. And as a result of having to use more gene seed than they use on men, the transformations of the women into Space Marines would be even more physically and psychologically taxing than the male Space Marines, and as a result, fewer of the women than the men, who already are the 1% of 1% of people who survive the process, could possibly survive. Which I'm just going to play SJW's advocate here, because here's the thing: the only people advocating for female Space Marines are for the most part, social justice advocates. The problem being is if GW was to acquiesce to the idea of female space marines, that would result necessarily in more female characters dying from the process of turning them into space marines. Which I'm just going to hazard a guess because I've seen this happen before. If the SJWs were given what they want, which is female space marines, they would then start complaining that the female characters dying as a result of the process of turning them into space marines would be somehow misogynistic, and then we would be right back to square one, if not worse. Anyway, moving on.
Right, okay. A bit of background during 40K's formative years, the late 80s and early 90s. Wow. Did not know that. I assumed 80s, but okay. GW Games Workshop didn't feel the need to market to women by including them in its #1 favorite army, and women fans weren't in much of a position to tell GW they wanted to be included, so the game's power armored poster children stayed exclusively big, beefy boys.
Because they're a dystopian theocracy in the middle of a fall of civilization and a constant war with aliens, mutants, robot cyborgs, and of course literal goddamn demons and chaos gods. As in, humanity at large is fighting for its life. The technology of the Imperium is dilapidated in comparison to what it was like during the golden age of technology, and gene seed is in and of itself a rare resource to begin with. So you're in a post-apocalyptic, technologically dilapidated war, and you want soldiers. Are you going to insist that all people be allowed to participate in your super army? Mind you that, again, only 1% of 1% of applicants to the Space Marine process even survive in the first fucking place, and knowing full well that you will have to use double the amount of gene seed, this incredibly rare resource, to make females into Space Marines? Or are you going to A, protect your women folk, and B, create the best soldiers for your hypothetical army, which would be the 1% of 1% of men who can't even survive the process in the first place? And mind you, once again, women have a specifically female regiment within the Emperor's forces. They're called the Sisters of Battle. And they are usually the only people who are allowed to be around the Space Marines that aren't other Space Marines. So the entire actual Imperium army, the ones that aren't the super special, Uber forces, they are comprised of both men and women. Women have their own special version, which are basically the warrior nuns known as the Sisters of Battle. The only place where men are exclusive to is the Space Marines, largely because, as far as we know, only the top 1% of 1% of men should even apply to become Space Marines in the first fucking place, and only 1% of 1% of those will actually survive the process that turns them into Space Marines. This is like with Marvel Comics asking why can't everyone be Captain America? Because the super soldier serum is a rare resource to begin with, and as the movie explained, i.e. the first Captain America movie explained, you really need to be careful who you stick the needle in, because good will become great, bad will become worse. Meaning that you need to choose not just the physically capable people in your army to become super soldiers, you need to also make sure that they are morally capable and morally Paragon-esque, because otherwise you're creating tyrants. A similar thing applies here. The process of turning a human into a Space Marine is incredibly physically taxing, to the point that only the top 1% of 1% of people can even apply in the first place, And then you add to that only 1% of 1% of those are likely to survive the process that turns them into Space Marines in the first place. So, do you then, bearing in mind that you're a dystopian theocracy fighting wars on several fronts at any given point, make sure that you get the best soldiers by recruiting the top 1% of 1% of men and the top 1% of those that will survive the thing? Or do you double down on including women for no good reason and waste twice the amount of gene seed to get only equal results? That would be remarkably stupid in universe for them to do. Anyway, moving on.
Today, after 36 years of reinforcing lore inertia version, Space Marines are still 40% men.
You're breaking up a little bit, dude. I don't know what happened to your mic.
Can you hear me now?
Okay, yeah, now you're fine. I don't know what happened.
Okay. Oh, okay. Sorry, Giant Turtle. I just saw this. I was on the other page. It's my fault. So he says hello. You find me. Honestly, we were kind of late as well, like a couple minutes before starting. So most of the aspirants usually testing or training the operations, and some chapters on the organs one at a time, risk of mutation, whatever you call the wolfen, or even being possessed and exercised in one case. I'm going to word for it, Drentro, because I am not that into Warhammer 40k or Warhammer in general. Nothing against it. I do like more of the offset stuff. It's just there's a lot there, and I am afraid of getting into it because I know I will take a long time to learn the lore. I do have other things to do.
He doesn't want to tumble down yet another rabbit hole.
I really don't. I'm sorry. It's like I've already been in my life, and I am not. I'm too busy in my to do that yet.
You also might not like 40k because it's very grimdark, and I
That
know
is
you
also
don't.
that is
You're not
yeah
a
that
big
is
fan of grimdark.
yeah that is also another thing. I like obviously I've said I like how I kind of got into Warhammer 40k was like the pair. I see that, yeah.
I would point out, Sir Dragon Turtle, that you, sir, have a long list of things that I've recommended to you that you have yet to sacrifice your social life on the altar of. So, pot and
Right.
kettle.
But all right, let me reread that because all right. Today, after 30 years of self-reinforcing lore and risk aversion, Space Marines are still front and center of every major 40k.
It's because they're the most notable and remarkable, like, unique piece of lore in 40k. For example, there is no such equivalent in classic Warhammer. I actually tend to like classic Warhammer better than I do 40k because I'm bigger into the fantasy aspects of things, and Warhammer is, in its original form, was more a fantasy franchise rather than a sci-fi franchise. But even so, the reason why the Space Marines remain front and center is because they are the most unique portion of um, of the lore of 40k. The only thing you could maybe analogize them to would be the Spartans from Halo, and they kind of came about around the same time and sort of borrowed from each other. So the jury is still very much out on the chicken and egg conversation there vis-a-vis Space Marines v Spartans.
All right. Huh.
Yeah, they want the and this is the thing, and something I wish that Art had mentioned on his argument with that one dude, um, or the debate he had with that one dude that I can't remember the name of it at this exact moment. The thing is, again, it no one is saying, and not even Art said during their conversation, that SJWs aren't allowed to have, in the privacy of their own games or their own gaming spaces, their own headcanons or homebrews or fan fictions. But that's not good enough for the latecomer SJWs. They want their headcanons and homebrews, and fan fictions to be the actual canon. They will not be satisfied with privately engaging with their own shit or even having their own gaming spaces where they can be with each other. They have to get it properly canonized or they feel like they failed because they actually want to own a piece of the proper IP. It's not good enough for them to simply have fan fiction or headcanons or homebrews on their own terms, which is the difference between simply being an atypical player of some setting and actually trying to co-opt it. Because I can tell you there have been many times when I have headcanoned or homebrewed or fan fiction something that I liked or didn't like about some IP that I enjoy, but I did not then lobby for it to become the new canon. That is the difference between being willing to inclusively engage with the IP and exclusively try to conquer or gatekeep it.
It goes beyond ideology. A lot of these people want their own personal headcanon, etc., to be canon and enforced on everyone else. Okay, to be fair, Dragon Turtle, that is a lot of fandoms. Like that is a lot of portions.
But here's the difference. When someone comes up with a headcanon or piece of homebrew that you don't like, you can ignore it. When a group of same people go out of their way to make their headcanon the actual canon, then you can no longer engage with your hobby. Unless you are willing to headcanon or homebrew the original canon back into your particular instance. Which raises the question, of course, is in the case of the implicitly inclusive gaming space, where everyone is allowed to have their own separate headcanons and homebrews if they feel like it, then no one is excluded because everyone has at least some connected deference to the actual canon. But in the explicitly exclusive variety of this, either one or other of these two sides will wind up having to headcanon and homebrew their preferred canon. Why is it that for some reason the social justicely minded folks believe that their canon is worthy of being the actual canon and that everyone else's headcanon should simply be homebrew? Meanwhile, the actual canon as it currently stands without the intervention of these people is closer to what the core audience actually wants. And they would actually be demoralized or incensed if they now found that they had to headcanon on homebrew the setting because something had changed it. And as I said at the beginning before we got into this article, if something is important enough to change, then it is important enough to leave alone. And if something is not important at all, then why is it so important that it be changed? Because you can't have it both ways. Either whatever piece of IP we're talking about is important and therefore is just as important to be defended as it is to be changed, or the piece of IP we're talking about is not important, in which case you're wasting time trying to alter it rather than simply, again, no one is excluding you from headcanoning and homebrewing. We are simply saying that you are not obliged to have your headcanons and homebrews seen as actual doctrine. Moving on.
Naturally, fans already build their own female Space Marines at home with third-party components and headcanon. But in the official models, Warhammer 40k books and K games, all Space Marines are male. Some folks want to change that, mostly so the female fans feel more represented. Oh my god. Hold on. Let me read the last sentence there.
Mm-hmm.
Others really serious don't want it changed, and they're so keen to make sure everyone knows it.
Okay, again, let me explain the sets to you. In the one case, we have a situation where anyone can headcanon or homebrew anything they wish in the privacy of their own gaming space. And there is also the actual official canon. In the other case, one or other of these sets of people are going to wind up pissed off because someone else has laid claim to the actual canon, because they weren't content with simply implicitly, inclusively allowing for personal headcanons and or personal stylized choices. No one is saying that they shouldn't be allowed to make headcanons or no one is saying that anyone should be excluded from making headcanons and homebrews. But what we are simply saying is that there is a distinction between headcanons and homebrews and actual canon. And if someone tries to enforce their headcanon to the level of actual canon, then one or more sets of people are going to be pissed off. And in this case, the people who will be pissed off by the change are the actual original core fan base. Whereas the people making the change are doing so for purely ideological and self-satisfaction reasons. So why is it that it is considered toxic and quasi-fascist for the group of fans that represent the core fan base and the actual canon getting annoyed at the changes to the canon, but it's not seen as toxic or quasi-fascist of this other set of people insisting on the change? And again, I point out, if something is important enough to change, then it is important enough to defend it from change. If it's or to put another way, as I usually put it, if it's important enough to change, it's important enough to leave alone. And if it's not important to leave it alone, then it's also not important to change it. In either case, what should happen is the organic adjustment or refreshment of the setting as and when a meritocratic change takes place, because that's the other portion of this conversation that always gets obscured by this. There have been and will continue to be changes to various different canons. The difference between changes that are accepted and changes which are not are this thing called merit, because right now what we have is two sets of people on being charitable, we'll call it equal footing. You have the people who want to insist on the changes so that the actual canon better reflects their head canon, and there are the people who prefer the canon as it is and want it to remain as it is. Now, in such a case where you have two sets of people on relatively equal footing, the deciding factor should be argumentation and merit. Meaning, since these two states of being are on relatively equal footing, you could try to morally invalidate one or more of them, which would be stupid and counterproductive and malign, or you could simply argue the case and allow your arguments to stand on merit. If your arguments can't stand on merit, then they can GTFO, as is always the case whenever a change to any given IP occurs. The changes which make sense and add to the character should remain. The changes which weaken the setting or weaken the characters should GTFO. These are the rules. The rule of changes to any given IP is the same as the rule of changes to any given playstyle, namely the gamer's credo, get good to scrub, which in the context of writing means make changes to the character or setting that actually benefit the character or setting, or GTFO. These are basically the only two options. Hence, when we have these kind of arguments, the deciding factor should be things like argument and merit. And moral arguments are inadmissible because we are not talking about a moral subject matter. We are talking about a artistic idea, wherein the only moral subject matter at play should be meritocracy. Moving on.
Alright, Giant Turtle said some things. There are many people who I don't know about changing canon, but they definitely homebrew this sort of stuff a lot. Even turn the Primarchs into waifus. Okay. Something tells me
The
this
Primarchs are sexy. I don't really see anything wrong with that. As long as they're not advocating that it become the actual canon.
Something tells me this isn't the sort of thing they were thinking of. Also, how much do you want to bet next they'll try to make a Marine fall for Slaanesh because they wanted a transition and the bigoted Imperium wouldn't let them? Also, for some of these people, get scrubbed good. Okay, that last one I'm confused about.
I think he's making a joke, but
Oh.
yeah. He's making one of those play on word type things.
Okay.
I think the implication is that some fandoms would be better off without certain people in the discourse, which I don't. Obviously, there are certain people who I would really rather not open their gops about things, but again, the deciding factor is whether or not their arguments actually hold up to any kind of scrutiny, which is the important bit, because meritocracy. Moving on.
Alright. Living in these spaces every day, I admit I'm so tired of the whole damned business, and mostly I just hope it'll go away. But then I remember two things. First, stay neutral is always a vote for the status quo, which currently is a cesspit, a bile? No, village.
Bilge,
right. God damn it. And second, when you turn your back on cesspits, unpleasant things start to grow from them.
You've kind of presupposed that this cesspit you're talking about actually exists, and you presuppose that there's some kind of causal slippery slope whereby if you leave the quote-unquote cesspool alone, it will get worse. Need I remind you that it is usually the people advocating for the change to the canon that bring up Space Marines, or female Space Marines. almost no one in the actual fandom brings up female Space Marines, because for most people within the actual fandom, the matter was settled several iterations of the game ago. The God Emperor himself, even during the golden age of technology, could not justify female Space Marines, and so there's no reason for the Imperium to try and justify female Space Marines, especially given that in the actual Imperium army it is non-gendered, meaning that both men and women can be found in the actual Imperium army, and that the female part of the population have their own specialist organization known as the Sisters of Battle, aka the Death Nuns. I don't know. See, this is the thing. A actual fan of Warhammer 40k would point out that men have the Space Marines and women have the Sisters of Battle, and the non-specialists of the Imperium army can go into any branch of the Imperium army other than those two, and therefore in the non-specialist Imperium army you can find men and women all over the fucking place, because again, we're in the middle of a societal collapse and being besieged on all sides by various forms of death fuckery, and thus we need every fighter. Your issue seems to be that we are not allowing women into the specifically male space. But here's a question. Would you allow the rank and file Imperium soldier into the Sisters of Battle? Would you allow for Brothers of Battle? Or is it somehow magically that the Sisters of Battle must remain an entirely female space, because that's female representation, but the Space Marines need not remain a solely male space? See, this is the thing, and this happens in reality as well. I remember when there was a big controversy over the fact that girls can't join the Boy Scouts. Now, an actual egalitarian approach to this would be to abolish both the Boy Scouts and the Girl Scouts and simply create a unisex organization called the Scouts. But that's not what they did. What the Girl Scout and Boy Scout organization actually did was allow girls to join the Boy Scouts if they want to, but keep the Girl Scouts in an entirely dick-free zone. I.e., no boys allowed in the Girl Scouts, but girls are in fact now allowed in the Boy Scouts, which is stupid. Again, I would have been fine with the egalitarian approach of let's abolish the Boy Scouts and the Girl Scouts and create a unisex organization called the Scouts. But that's not what they did. They gave women the privilege to join the boy thing, but they denied men the privilege of joining the girl thing. That's not egalitarian. That's not equalitarian. That's not a redressing of societal grievances or whatever the fuck. It's not about equality of opportunity. It's not about representation. It's not about any of those things. It is simply good old fashioned and baked into our fucking primordial instincts gynocentrism. Because women get special treatment, men get dick, apparently. And that's why I'm annoyed at this. Because if you were actually trying to be egalitarian, which again, we're dealing with a far-flung dystopian cyberpunk theocracy, but if you were actually advocating for some kind of egalitarianism, you would be advocating for some kind of merger of the Sisters of Battle and the Space Marines. But that's not what you're advocating for. You're advocating that women should be allowed in the male thing. There should be female Space Marines, but there will surprisingly be no Brothers of Battle. Even though your grounds for insisting on female Space Marines were egalitarian in theory, you would get extremely ticked off if, for example, you even caught wind that someone was homebrewing Brothers of Battle. You would call them misogynist for minimizing female representation. And yet we can't call you misandrist for minimizing male representation. That's you see how that's not an egalitarian system? You see how that's an incredibly gynocentric system where women get all the privileges of their own sex and all the privileges that men have, but men don't even get the privileges of their own sex if we can help it. That's the level of bullshit we're on here. Moving on.
All right. Okay, hold on. I'll read that in a minute, Giant Turtle. Let me get through a little more of this. So it's time we had a little chat about this whole sorry situation. What's going on, why it sucks, why it matters, and what's to be done about it. Strap in, nerds. This is going to be a long and bumpy ride.
Oh, you have no idea.
Actually, hold on. I want to check something real quick, so I'm going to.
And while he's checking the thing, I will address the thing that you said, Dragon Turtle. Here's the thing, and this is the immensely ironical thing. If gender dysphoria began to happen in the 41st millennium, they would probably suspect Slaneshi taint. They would probably see it as some form of chaos corruption. Which, of course, it's sort of ironic that, we aren't approaching things like the Imperium, and we are sort of being slowly eaten away by chaos corruption, but never the fuck mind.
So this is kind of a rather long article, so we are going to have to break this up a bit.
Mm-hmm.
So probably another hour or so. If we make enough headway, and then we'll stop and go on to the next thing. Yeah, because I scrolled, man. It's a long one. Don't mention the G word is this section, which I think is the first section.
Okay.
Before we get,
yeah.
Sorry, I mean, did you have any?
No, go ahead.
Okay. Before we get started, it's worth remarking with some regret how hesitant I am to even broach this subject in print. Not because it's not important to or appropriate, mind you. Politics, including gender politics, are everywhere in fiction because they permeate every facet of human existence in the world, including our hobbies, games, and stories, whether you want them to or not. What the fuck?
No, fuck you. Here's the thing. This is the dead center heart of the conflation that we're dealing with here. They seem to have convinced themselves that there is no philosophy outside of or in absence of politics, that politics and philosophy are the same fucking thing, and they're not. And Warhammer 40K is a perfect example because Warhammer exists in a theocratic science fantasy setting, a grimdark, post-apocalyptic grimdark one at that. But the thing is, this kind of theocracy well and truly predates our notions of what we would now refer to as politics. But because they seem to think that politics and philosophy are exactly the same thing, they will not allow that there is anything philosophical that can even be broached without tying into politics somewhere. But politics and philosophy aren't the same thing. Politics is a kind of philosophy, but there are many, many kinds of philosophy that have nothing to do with politics. However, I'm going to have to stop mid-rant because I just realized I have to use the restroom. I will be back.
Okay.
For the record, this is why I don't usually eat before stream. because I don't want to have to stop things to use the bathroom.
Okay, addressing some of your points you made earlier, Giant Turtle. Merger of Sisters of Battle and the Space Marines exercise, that would definitely not work. I agree, because, and again, I'm limited in my knowledge of 40k, so feel free to correct me if I'm wrong on this. Oh, okay. I think that has been. I'll wait for on. From what I understand, this is, well, to be fair, they're all, most of the like Space Marine, most of the Imperium Man are like fanatical. But that fanaticism even caused divide amongst themselves, obviously with like heretic bullshit and stuff like that. So I do agree with what you said though, and yeah, they definitely could not really work together on general, in general. I do agree the strap-in nerds thing. Yeah, honestly, I think anyone who says that kind of, it never comes from like a genuine place.
It has the same energy as how do you do, fellow kids.
Yeah. You back?
Yeah. I
Yeah.
will have to wait because my brother is showering, so
All
I have to just be uncomfortable for the foreseeable future. But back to the point.
right.
The main thrust of my point there is because they seem to have basically conflated philosophy with politics, they basically claim any philosophical content in any IP is by its nature political content, which is not remotely the same thing. Politics is sort of by definition limited to the public sphere, which is completely different from things like metaphysics, ethics, aesthetics, history, human nature. Like all of these things can be broached and have been broached without any deference whatsoever to politics. And I find it kind of disturbing that not only have these people conflated politics and philosophy, they seem to have forgotten the very existence of philosophy without politics. They forgot that you can have a metaphysical, a spiritual, an ethical, a artistic, and aesthetic conversation without bringing in policy or like government orientation, which is just stupid and silly. The world is, the ancient Shakespeare quote is there are more things in heaven and earth than are dreamt of in your philosophy. But I think in this case we have to modify it for there are more things in heaven and earth than are dreamt of in your politics, because not only have they forgotten that there is philosophy outside of politics, they have forgotten that philosophy is even a thing without deference to politics. Moving on.
Okay. Yeah, sorry, Giant Turtle and I were having a discussion on something you said earlier about how the Sisters of Battle and the Space Marines wouldn't work together that great, like if they were merged.
Well, I mean, aren't the Sisters of Battle basically considered kind of the auxiliary to the Space Marines in most cases anyway? At this point, which once again gives lie to the whole we need female Space Marines because more representation. Because even on the non-Imperium side, even on the chaotic side, you've got the witch cults among the Dark Elves. You've got you've got the you've got several female Eldar. You've got, Slaanesh and her demons are very often female in nature. Like, there is female representation all over the place in 40K. It's just not in the fucking Space Marines. And the only reason they really have for wanting the Space Marines has nothing to do with in-universe logic or bettering the lore in any way. They want it because it is the most marketable and powerful cultural institution that 40K has to offer. Which means they want to weaponize culture. It's nothing to do with the IP. And I'm sorry, but I flat out refuse this idea that culture is some kind of moral or political weapon. Like, I might be a intellectual heretic here, but I will always maintain, and I will maintain until my dying breath, that non-diegetic things are less important to any given piece of art or artistic endeavor than diegetic things. Themes and metaphors and extrapolations are all well and good, but they are at best tertiary, if not entirely superfluous, to any given artistic endeavor. Themes are bullshit. They are non-diegetic, and the more you try to work hard and make them into something that is diegetic, the more you make the IP in question childish and oversimplistic. I don't care how much intellectual ego stroking you have to do as a result of, oh, but my glorious non-diegetic themes. Fuck your themes. If it can't be expressed organically within the setting, then either you need to rework the setting from the start so that it can work consistently, or you need to let your themes fucking go. Those are simply the rules, and I am going to be rather hardline on this. Fuck themes. If your themes can occur organically to the setting without much of your intervention, then great. Or if you can be a cognizant enough creator that you can work them in from the ground up, fine. But if you have to force themes into a setting, then they weren't there originally, and you are basically guilty of acting like an interventionist deity at that point. Moving on.
Okay. Alright, at the risk of stating the obvious, anyone who berates you for trying to insert politics into their hobby is either woefully uninformed, dogmatically ignorant, cynically pushing their own politics under the guise of apolitical gatekeeping, or else some combination of those three. Such people deserve your sympathy and support because they're probably going through some stuff, but their views don't amount to a hill of beans.
My sweetheart, once again, you're making this issue. One, politics isn't the same as philosophy. And two, no, when quite a lot of people want no politics in their IP, they mean they want no politics in their IP. You don't understand that because of the aforementioned. You are conflating philosophical content or philosophical material with political material or political subject matter. They aren't the same thing. You can have broad, abstract, philosophical, spiritual, and metaphysical discussions without ever paying any deference whatsoever to politics or themes for that matter. Which, by the way, while I'm on this hill and dying on it anyway, that goes for the Jungian traditionalists too. Nobody gives a fuck about your archetypes. Archetype theory is a useful tool for examining art, but it is a shitty tool for creating it. If you intentionally strive to create something that resembles archetypes, you're probably missing the point by several nautical miles. Themes and non-diegetic bullshit are exactly that. They are non-diegetic bullshit, i.e. they are out of universe. And if you keep insisting on placing them in universe where they don't belong, then you are the one in error. But more to the point, there are many people who actually want no politics in their material. Because here's the thing. Politics are by their very nature woven throughout wider society. They're woven throughout the institutions because the nature of the public sphere and especially the institutions within the public sphere are what basically politics is. But here's the thing. A lot of people want politics to be divorced from any given IP because they think that the kinds of philosophy that are contained within politics are actually fairly limited and small scale. It is a good rule of thumb that if your IP isn't about politics, it's about a wider and more far-reaching kind of philosophy, something that's larger and wider than the day-to-day goings-on of the institutions that make up civilization. Did you know that there are things that actually are more vast and more abstract than the day-to-day goings-on of societal institutions? And that the average person actually has some desire to engage with things that are wider than their everyday world. And by insisting that the only kinds of philosophy that can be put into anything are political philosophy, then you're basically limiting whatever scope of whatever world you're making to the day-to-day goings-on of societal institutions. And there's a lot of stuff, even in the day-to-day goings-on, that have nothing to do with my society or my institutions. That's why people laugh at you and mock you when you insist that everything is political, or that the only way to be apolitical is to be pushing the opposite kind of politics. No, it's because even and especially within art and philosophy, there are wider and more important or more meaningful things than the day-to-day goings-on of institutions, which is what politics tends to mean, relating to society and or institutions. Moving on.
All right. This reminds me of those bad faith Christian apologists. They redefine everything to the point where you cannot even abstain from the argument, let alone not come to their conclusion. Everything is political, plus you can't stand still on a moving train equals everything you do can and will be dictated by our ideology, and not following these instructions mean you are helping evil.
Yep, you're either with my god or you're with my devil. That is literally what we're doing here, and it's just as annoying when the allegedly secular people do it. Which, by the way, just so that we're clear, doesn't mean that the tradcons have license to go ahead and start doing it again. It means that we should finally, as a society, grow up out of this approach. Stop trying to shove morality into every nook and cranny of civilization. It doesn't belong there. Morality belongs in the private sphere. Politics belongs restricted to the public sphere, and the two should be avoided as much as possible from getting together. And in any case, both the public sphere and the private sphere should be limited to their respective areas of influence, and things should be allowed to be expressed and discussed outside of both of them. Can you imagine locking someone in their home and allowing them only to experience what was in their home? Because that's the equivalent of locking someone in the private sphere. But you're just as stupid if you try to lock someone out of every home and insist they only exist outside of any private residence. That would be just as torturous and just as stupid. And more to the point, you'd be really, really stupid if you went up to Albert Einstein and said, "What you have said, Albert Einstein, has no bearing on either the public or private sphere, and therefore it is meaningless entirely." Do you see how stupid that sounds? Do you see how stupid it would, and incredibly counterproductive to human advancement, if you were to say your field of study must either have everything to do with the private sphere or everything to do with the public sphere, and never anything outside of either of them? You see how remarkably stupid and closed-minded that sounds? But that's basically what these people are doing. Both the moralistic people who insist that things that belong only in the private sphere should be expanded to the public sphere, and the politics people who insist that everything in the public sphere should expand to the private sphere. Never mind that things should be simply outside of either domain. And it's the things that exist outside of either domain that are actually, important and worth discussing. But yeah, whatever. Moving on.
All right. No, I'd usually avoid it because it feels like constructive discussion on the matter has simply ground to an intractable, yeah,
Intractable.
intractable halt. In 2024, meaningful discourse about gender in Warhammer 40k spaces has been almost entirely drowned out by never-ending bad faith arguments about female space marines. It's been going on for years. It's exhausting, it's dispiriting, and it's so boring.
My friend, gender itself is empty and facile to the point of being utterly meaningless. The fact that anyone needs to bring up gender at all in the first place is the problem. But I must point out to you that it is your side of the argument that keeps insisting on raising the gender question, because unfortunately, there's a certain percentage of our society that knows only how to talk about philosophy or politics as it relates to gender, even though gender is utterly meaningless and facile. And I experienced this firsthand, by the way, when I was in college. I met someone who was studying gender studies, and I was studying philosophy. And my first question was, and I still have yet to find a substantive answer to this question, by the way, why, given all the things that you could discuss within the philosophical realm, why of all things would you focus on gender? And I still want an answer to that fucking question, by the way, because to me, gender is the most simplistic and facile thing on the face of the fucking planet. And the fact that so much of our modern day discourse is pinned to the wall with such a useless and meaningless superficial bit of twaddle is sad and disparaging for me, because there are so many more interesting things in the world to talk about than gender, and yet some alleged intellectuals bring up gender in literally every facet of their lives, and it flummoxes me entirely.
Okay. Um, Let me. Okay. But Don, if you have nothing to hide, you have nothing to fear. Go broadcast your every thought and action to the public. Seriously, though, privacy is now suspicious to some people. Yeah, that's where I am fortunate that I haven't come across that. Granted, I don't talk to a lot of people, so
Yeah, the whole if you have nothing to hide, you have nothing to fear. Well, I would flip that and say, if you have no reason to interfere with my life, then you have no justification to interfere with my life. That's how that goes. Because freedom of association is only meaningful with the possibility of freedom from association. And freedom from association is only meaningful in the context of having the option to either choose to associate or not.
right. Um, okay, Gentle, I'm starting to think we need to abolish the concept of gender. Just say people have a biological sex, male and female, with rare intersex individuals and various masculine, feminine, and neutral
Yeah,
traits. Yeah.
honestly, at this point, it would be a more productive conversation than I mean, the fact that gender studies is its own separate thing kind of baffles me anyway, because it's like, again, I came across this the first time I met a gender studies um a gender studies student in college, and I still maintain this. Given all the multifarious and interesting things that you could choose to talk about within the realm of like the human experience, why would you fixate on the lens of gender? It's so childish and facile that it boggles my mind. Here we are in a vast ocean of possible realms of discussion and experience, and some people will never grow out of that one single drop labeled gender. It baffles me.
Uh, okay. I'll read this last one and then we'll move on. These people are obsessed with I'm just gonna say genitals. I think. What color, sex? Oh no, wait. Genitals.
Gen- Genitals, you had it right.
Okay. What color, sex? What you identify them as? What you do with them? If you want them to be different, what kinky stuff you do with them, etc.
Yeah, and again, given all the various things one could choose to make their life of, why would you? Again, we're in the middle of a vast ocean, and some people's scope of intellectual endeavor will only ever occupy this one tiny droplet of water labeled gender. It's so sad, and the fact that we have to act as though that one drop is equal to the entire rest of the ocean, or that that one drop is even more important than the entire rest of the ocean, is just sort of silly to me. Moving on.
All right. Uh, it's a shame, really. At one time, the debates around gender in Warhammer 40k, were, if not drastically more intelligent and courteous, at least more varied. I remember explorations of gender roles among soldiers and civilians from all the weird and wonderful Warhammer 40k factions and the imaginative diversity sci-fi allowed for in such things. We considered all the regular human psychology, including gendered psychology, that's buried deep inside Space Marines' head, sublimated to their warlike programming, but still there, threaded through their personalities.
You do know that a lot of that gender bending that you are praising in this particular instance comes from literal demons in the setting, right? You do know that some of the quote unquote diverse perspectives that the Warhammer universe contains are literally the machinations of deities who want to murder fuck all of reality to death over and over again. Just pointing that out. I'm happy you found something that fits your niche in 40k. I really am. But are you aware that the Chaos Gods aren't good or even morally neutral in most cases? They are the enemy of all sane existence. They want to murder fuck reality to death with itself over and over again until they get bored with that too, and then they'll start bickering amongst each other as to whose method of murder fuckery is better than the others. By the way, if I was to have to choose, Zinch is probably the least objectionable of the Chaos Gods, in my opinion. But then again, he insists on the whole change thing, and that does nothing for me except make me wonder what's going to happen when Mab wears him like a freaking suit, because that's what would happen in a fight between Zinch and Mab. She would just butcher him, and I would be sitting there with popcorn in the background laughing as she did so, which would probably be the best happy ending in the Warhammer universe, frankly. But that's neither here nor there. Moving on.
We mark the apparent Astartarian tendency to ponder and discuss baseline human experiences and impulses supposedly expunged from their brains like love, sex, and family. And we wondered who these transhuman men would be if they were ever allowed to lead a human life of their own. Um, I don't really have. I can't say anything to this because I don't know enough about
I
the
mean,
space.
we would all like to see a far-flung future of the 40K universe where the Chaos Gods have been defeated and humanity gets to go back to being a non-theocratic fuckwit race, but unfortunately, because of the nature of 40K, we're probably not going to get there anytime soon. And even then, any story about the far-flung utopian future where the golden age of technology had come again and the Chaos Gods were defeated would have to be a one-off or maybe an alternate universe because there's not a lot of story potential in a golden age restored 40K universe where all the Chaos Gods are dead because most of the storytelling potential of that kind of story would probably have been filled by all the other forms of storytelling within gaming. Because here's the thing: as much as it's grimdark murder fuckery tendencies is a little bit depressing from time to time, it is also what makes 40K unique because that kind of theocratic army versus Lovecraftian hordes thing doesn't really get brought up as often in other franchises. So, as much as I would like to see a potential one-off far-flung future story where the Chaos Gods have been defeated and the golden age of technology has come again, it would have to be just that, a one-off or an alternate universe, because most of the storytelling potential in that probably wouldn't be as much as the storytelling potential in the mainline Warhammer 40K universe. I would enjoy occasionally playing in that hypothetical alternate universe, and I would highly encourage for GW to make one. But please, for the love of God, make it an alternate universe, not the original canon, because that would be stupid. That would rob 40K of what makes it unique compared to all the other franchises.
Oh, okay. Um. Okay, Giant Turtle Imperial Fist looked at a conversation at a dinner party like a battle because that's how he rationalized it. They are made for war, and war they do, and that we wonder what sort of lives these transhuman men would have lived. Thing sounds a lot like that Halo TV show. They butchered it, but maybe that's just me being cynical.
No, no, I think you're somewhere near the mark, Dragon Turtle, largely because it is the same sorts of people who approach Halo that way are the same sorts of people who approach 40K this way. Um,
I'm
and
sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
no, go ahead. You're fine.
Well, no, it's completely off topic, sort of. It I was just gonna mention that because he brought up the Halo TV show. I'm not rewriting the TV show as a side project, but I am rewriting the newer trilogy that came from 343. It's taken me a while. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. It was just like that kind of sparked me to mention that.
Right. Okay. But yeah, this thing of we don't have any respect for the actual IP. We want to see it be utterly different from what it is. Thing because again, it shows it's very similar to the gender thing from earlier. They don't actually seem to like or want storytelling universes or IPs with untapped, unlimited potential. They want all things to resemble their most mundane of fantasies. And even I, who have a certain level of deference for self-insert logic and for actualization as opposed to escapism, I don't want that doesn't mean I want to focus on the parts of any given IP that are boring. It's that I want to be a version of myself within those universes. Just like what I was describing earlier. I'm okay with the idea of a far flung future timeline of the 40K universe, although it would have to be an alternate universe or a one off story that was the Chaos Gods have been defeated and the golden age of technology has come again. But if I was to play a game in that hypothetical alternate universe, I wouldn't want to focus on the mundane aspects of it. I would want to focus on the parts of it that would make that universe particularly interesting. Because that's the thing. Even in the hypothetical alternate universe I described, where the Chaos Gods have been defeated and humanity can basically kick its feet back up and go back to basically the golden age of technology, even that would be distinctly different from the most strawman version of realism, mundane reality that we currently have. Because, I mean, for the love of God, I'm the kind of person who, even in his mundane everyday life, I have a whole shelf full of grimoires. Like I have one whole bookcase that is just books on the topic of magic in our universe. And then I have a whole other shelf that's just fictional examples of magic in other universes, largely comics. But that's the thing. The difference between someone like me and someone like these people is they actually do wonder what would happen if a Space Marine and Slaanesh suffered a meet cute like a stereotypical romance novel. They literally don't have the scope of imagination beyond how can I turn literally every hypothetical universe I'm in to the most mundane and boring aspect of it. I'm tempted to call it Jerry Smith syndrome, because this is one of the reasons I really dislike the character of Jerry from Rick and Morty, because not only is he addicted to like norms and mundane reality, he actually resents the notion that there would be anything beyond that mundane reality. And I think that's what makes me different from these people. I can look at mundane reality and find the mystical, wonderful things in it. These people can look at the most wondrous and most absurd timelines and turn it only into the lowest common denominator of rom-com sitcoms. They can turn Tolkien into Cheers. They can turn 40K into Seinfeld. They can turn the MonsterVerse into Twilight, and so on. And maybe there is something particularly feminine about that, or maybe it's just people who are so addicted to norms that they actually view norms themselves as some kind of god at this point. So much that they should, not only aren't they going to aspire to anything more than the mundane reality that they've already been presented with, but they would actually get offended if you pointed out if there was anything beyond their mundane reality. Moving on.
Alright, we wondered who the hell Slaanesh was, whether he was a he or a she or a they, and why. Come to that, we wondered why Slaanesh was thought of as having a different gender from the other Chaos Gods at all. These were interesting, meaningful, nerdy questions.
Because she's the god of sex, and it's easier for people to imagine a god of sex as a goddess in a lot of cases than a god.
To be
That
fair,
doesn't mean that Slaanesh is, to my mind, a little bit like Desire of the Endless. They will take whatever form they have to engage in the kinky fuckery and the murder fuckery. But as a general rule, the Eldar always depicted her as female, and they were the ones who
gave birth to her.
That made her, for lack of a better phrase, or gave birth to her. So while she is probably the SJW goddess, if there were a real world equivalent to the Chaos Gods, it would be an almost two-horse race between Slaanesh and Tzeentch as to who was the de facto deity of the SJWs. But my money would be on the academics would worship Tzeentch, the rank and file SJWs would worship Slaanesh. But In any case, yes, Slanesh is female because she's a god of sex, and that kind of, especially given that a large part of her raison d'etre involves manipulation, that kind of sexual manipulation is more femme fatale-ish than it is male.
Okay. Dranger said some interesting stuff that I'm just now catching. So I was not paying attention in the chat. Okay. I stand by my theory. Normies will temporarily latch onto fantastical things, usually just surface level, for novelty or trends, but ultimately wants the familiar. They really just want sitcoms and rom-coms, specifically ones of modern middle or upper class Western people in a big city because it's familiar. Slaanesh is an eldritch abomination made of the psychological imprint of obsession, sensation, and trillions of degenerate psychic space god souls. It's like
I mean, yes,
it's like talking about the gender of the original Godzilla or COVID.
Godzilla is male in almost every iteration, so he is a he.
Does it really matter? It's a giant fucking monster that destroys everything in its path.
Not always. Sometimes he's more a protector of humanity than a destroyer.
Well, it's still a giant monster. Even unintendedly, he will destroy. Space elf soul. Oh, space elf souls, not space god. Okay, sorry.
Yeah, but yeah, the Eldar literally collapsed their civilization with murderfuckery and gave birth to a god whose only desire is to murderfuck all of reality.
Yeah, there was a. Again, just because it's the point of Warhammer that I'm most familiar with. You know, text to speech.
Mm-hmm.
There was a brief instances of Slaanesh in there, and yeah, I can get why it's the god of excess.
Yeah, she wants to murderfuck all of reality to exist into a state of like nebulous entropy clouds, which is why of the Chaos Gods I would prefer Tzeentch simply because of the sorcery and manipulation aspect, but the change thing is a deal breaker for me because I did bargain with Queen Mab specifically to avoid change and to give myself freedom from change. So yeah, no, even Tzeentch, even Tzeentch, even though Tzeentch and I would probably have the most in common and would probably be the closest to getting along because he would probably offer me the like Randall Flagg style immortality, and I would be okay with that. And then he would get to the part of his pitch where it ended up with change, and it was like, yeah, no, fuck you.
All right, I'm gonna read a little more, and then we're gonna call it around like 9:40. So
Okay.
now the chat is all female Space Marines, YN all the time, and it blows. Some fans argue it'd be an easily accessible new idea to fold into 40K's timeline, far from the weirdest thing in the setting, and would help move 40K away from feeling like it's still designed for 14-year-old boys.
Fuck you, you elitist prick. Just because something is just because something has a mostly male audience or a largely male set of appeal doesn't mean that it's somehow primitive. In the same way that just because something appeals largely to middle-aged housewives doesn't mean they're gaudy and primitive either. Granted, they very often are, but same principle applies. I could just as easily dismiss you for liking Sex in the City, just like you try to dismiss basically any teenager who happens to like 40K. The point is that neither of these arguments hold the necessary water, because the audience of a given IP doesn't necessarily denote the worth of the IP. But more to the point, the easiest way to actually do female Space Marines in a way that wouldn't piss everyone off would be if they were Chaos Space Marines who served Slaanesh. But the problem there is that the SJWs would get annoyed with the fact that the only way there can be female Space Marines is if the Chaos God of Murderfuckery insists that there are, which would imply some very negative things about the desire for female Space Marines. But this is the thing. This is why I touched on this earlier. You are free to have your headcanons. You are free to have your homebrews. You are free to have your fan fictions. What you are not then allowed to do is knock on GW's door and insist, based on moral fervor and nothing the fuck else, that your headcanon is morally superior to the actual canon and therefore should be made actual canon. That is a childish pseudo-intellectual moralizing tantrum, and that is why people object to this. And this is also, by the way, why this argument has become so all-encompassing. Because the people who insist on female Space Marines for ideological, moral, and political reasons keep bringing it up, even though it is continuously refuted by the entire rest of the fan base, because the entire rest of the fan base highest value is this in the canon, or would this be world-breaking? Whereas the SJW's highest value is some kind of moral and political fervor worldview, where it's morally valid and therefore it should be the case somehow. Whereas denying it would be morally invalid and therefore shouldn't be the case somehow. You see how this annoying argument of yours is self-fulfilling, because here's what happens whenever this topic comes up. Someone of the SJW persuasion asks, why are there no female Space Marines, or there should be female Space Marines. The entire rest of the fan base autistically spurgs at them and points out in great detail why that shouldn't be the case or isn't the case. And then they go away for a while, and then the person comes back and tries again, and over and over and over and over again. If you want the female Space Marines question to end, you shouldn't be agitating for GW to do something about it. You should be advocating that the SJWs who keep bringing up the topic of female Space Marines shut the fuck up. Because the more time they spend bringing it the fuck up, the more time the rest of the fan base has to spend knocking it the fuck down. And we could all just go back to enjoying 40k if the people who kept bringing it up would just stop bringing it up. But they can't, because they're on some kind of moral crusade, much like the Chaos Cultist in Universe. And yes, I did just equate the SJWs or wokeness or social justice to a chaos cult, because there are many, many SJWs who look very much like the early stages of Slaanesh or Tzeentchian victims. Not so much Khorne or Nurgle, but that's because the Tradcons are the ones who are more often warped by Khorne and or Nurgle. Moving on.
Right. Okay. Now the chat. I read that. Sorry. Some fans argue that. God damn it. Okay, hold on. No, other fans say that's stupid and wrong. Only boy children can survive the transformation into a space marine. It says so in an old lore text that I don't own and have never read, but I'm sure I saw quoted somewhere.
Okay, Strawman, you just insinuated that the people making the argument against it are illiterate, which I noticed you're not doing with the pro-female Space Marine argument, despite being allegedly neutral and sick of either option. But here's the thing. It's not even boy children. It is the top 1% of 1% of boy children that can survive it. And even then, only the top 1% of 1% of that 1% of 1% will survive it. Because the process is very, very physically and psychologically taxing. So it's not even all boys who are capable of being Space Marines. It is the very rare 1% of 1% of boys that can survive being body horrored to death. But you're not thinking about that in this case because you're not actually thinking in universe terms, which is why I brought up earlier. Even if the SJWs got their way and got female Space Marines, they would still have something to complain about because if there were such a thing as female Space Marines, there would have to be such a thing as female aspirants. And because only 1% of 1% of the aspirants tend to survive, that would result in quite a lot of dead women, wouldn't it? Which would be something, something, something misogyny, now wouldn't it? So now not only do you have to change the gender of the possibility of female Space Marines, but you also have to make it somehow that women are more suited than men to be Space Marines, because then there are fewer dead females. And if you don't change the lore so that more females than males survive the process, then you're a misogynist for causing dead female characters somehow. You see how this is you see how this would not in fact end the conversation? Acquiescing to their demands would not end the conversation because first you're misogynist for not allowing women to be Space Marines, then you're misogynist for having all these dead female aspirants, so females need to actually be better than males as Space Marines, and then you don't even need to go any further than that because for some reason a bunch of dead little boys and dead young men are not a big deal, but the prospect of even fictional dead young women is somehow still misogyny. Meanwhile, I can't even call misandry without being called some kind of kook. Moving on.
I'm gonna read this last thing, and then we're gonna call it for this.
Mhm.
There are women in the other factions. Why do you need to mess with the Space Marines? And anyway, if you're so bothered about representation, why don't you go and play Sisters of Battle? They're women, aren't they?
Yes, that's actually a good question. Not only are there women all over the place everywhere else, but women do have their own specific section of the Emperor's armed forces or special forces, which is the Sisters of Battle. And yet I notice you're not advocating for Brothers of Battle or Brethren of Battle. Because again, it's like the Scouts thing. You didn't advocate that the Scouts become a unisex organization and the two merge together. You advocated that women should be allowed in the Boy Scouts, or young girls should be allowed in the Boy Scouts, but no boys should ever be allowed in the Girl Scouts because misogyny and threat and derp reasons. See, again, your argument is we should be allowed into the Space Marines because egalitarianism. But in actuality, what you're advocating is not egalitarian. What you're advocating is women should be allowed to do everything men can do and have the special privileges of women, whereas men shouldn't even be allowed to have the special privileges normally associated with men. Because gynocentrism is a good, and misandry is just how things are around here, I guess.
So, okay. Space Marines usually recruit from death worlds, feral worlds, and underhives for a reason. It's people in constant and other struggles to survive. Still say they'd insist that any Brothers of Battle must be trans.
Which still wouldn't be egalitarian, because no one is advocating for only trans men being Space Marines. They want specifically female, which means female identifying Space Marines. And I guarantee you that even if male Space Marines transitioned into women, that still wouldn't be good enough representation, and that would even be considered co-opting of the female experience by some men. Which again, the argument is we should be allowed to be in the Space Marines because egalitarianism. But much as with the Scouts in reality, they didn't actually create an egalitarian system. They created a system where women have both men's privileges and women's privileges, but men very often don't even have their own privileges. Which is
Moving on.
yeah, moving on.
Sorry, I just I mean, you can finish your thought. Obviously,
Go ahead. It's fine.
uh, I this is from fandompulse.com. Again, Dalton sent this one to me. X-Men fans are livid as Marvel Comics editor Tom Brevoort confirms coming reboot will be filled with politics. The message is the premise. It's published December 23rd, 2023 by John Della Rose.
Oh God, this asshole.
Tom
I
Brevoort
don't.
or
Well, both of them, but in that instance, I was referring to John Delarose. He is one of those people who latched on to Comicsgate without realizing what Comicsgate was for, and claimed that it was some kind of Christian reactionary thing. He literally basically is a right wing equivalent to an SJW. He's exactly the kind of Paul Pludge and Helen Lovejoy that we used to mock. And I would very much like to go back to mocking them, but in this instance, Tom Brevoort is the one who said the stupid thing, so I will at least give John Della Rose a chance to not say dumb shit.
right?
But I'm not holding my breath.
Right. All right. Wait, Tom Brevoort. Why does that name sound familiar?
He's been a comic writer for a long time.
Have we covered stuff from him before?
As in, have we covered comics he's written? I don't know.
Okay, I'm sorry. It's
I know,
just
I know he's been a comic creator for a long time now, but I think this is the first time that I think that he's done. I think this is the first time he's done something stupid enough to wind up on our chopping block. I think.
okay. All right. Marvel Comics editor Tom Brevoort. And if I say names wrong, I'm sorry. I don't pronounce names well at all when
He
I read them.
pronounced my name wrong for 6 months before I bothered correcting him.
So Marvel Comics editor Tom Brevoort has waded wade waded into the political debate with fans, feeling concerns that the new X-Men reboot will wing political manifesto disguised as a comic. It began with Tom Brevoort posting a graphic, a classic X-Men logo, and the text "From the Ashes" in July 2024. Fans replied with their concerns, and Brevoort went to the comment of passive aggressively attacking X-Men readers. The X-Men has. I don't really have anything to say to that. Phone.
I have things to say, but I will save it until after we actually get into the content. Because I feel
Okay.
like the mistake I made last time was I blew my load too early in the previous article, and that's why we didn't get far enough through it.
I mean, you do that every time.
Fair enough. Moving on.
Okay, the X-Men has been in bad shape for a long time. In 2019, writer Jonathan Hickman returned to Marvel Comics after years of self-imposed his career work, like East of West, which has gotten no positive reception. House of X, which brought the X-Men to a Krakoa, setting up a timeline and some strange changes for the mutant team. Okay, actually, okay, sorry. Little sidebar. What does everyone think about the Krakoa thing?
I don't remember anything particular about it. So I don't really have an opinion. X-Men aren't my thing, so like most of what I know about them comes from the '90s show and or Osmosis.
I mean, I kind of grew up with the most. Oh, am I breaking up?
No, you're fine.
Hmm.
I think it's just your connection, Dragon Turtle. He sounds fine to me. Is he
Hmm.
better now?
Can you hear me now? Okay, I only know it's second or third hand plus bits from Comic Story and stuff. I think the overall idea is bad and antithetical to the yeah, to the X-Men's credo before. Yeah, it's weird how for a time they turned the Inhumans into. I think I brought this up like once back, but because of the MCU and the whole thing with like X-Men and stuff, they Inhumans into the mutants, and that
Yeah, they were they
yeah
were
they
they were basically they were basically planning to replace the mutants with the Inhumans because they didn't have the rights to the mutants at the time. Which honestly, I kind of wish they had gone ahead with that plan because, like, I've always found the Inhumans more interesting, but then again, I'm also niche and weird, so who knows?
well, I mean, to be fair, they were one of the concepts that was introduced early in like the Fan War, right? Like when they
Hmm.
originally started, like so it only made sense that they would be. I'm not going to get into that because we could get into a full sidebar about how the MCU
We
could have been
could,
done better.
and we shouldn't.
But
So let's actually get through this before we go off tangenting too much more.
yeah, okay. Where was I? The X-Men now have these organic plant pods which cause them to respawn after they die, like the world is a video game. It takes all the danger out of being a mutant as Professor X and a council try to set up a nation and strong arm the world. I mean, the mutants already had a nation with Magneto, which was Genosha.
Genosha.
Yeah. The X-Men feel like a totalitarian peacekeeping force more than a band of superheroes trying to save the innocent. Worse, Jonathan Hickman left Marvel Comics hanging as he set up this intense world building of Krakoa and didn't finish a plot line. Marvel then assigned the series to far less talented writers who have made the book an unreadable mess over the last couple of years, spanning far too many titles for a reader to keep up with.
I mean, that is also true.
Now, longtime Marvel editor Tom Brevoort is back in the saddle, at least will be once July 2024 rolls around. The tease of From the Ashes follows Marvel's trend of rehashing old storylines. Jonathan Hickman already in his tenure, and now it looks like Tom Brevoort is using the classic title to herald a reboot.
Okay, just as a general rule, can we stop with the constant universe rebooting nonsense?
Yeah, I'll be honest. I
Like,
just
pick a timeline and stick with it for the foreseeable future, please.
okay. Hold on. All right. Yeah. Okay. Giant Turtles explained Krakoa here. It's basically mutants getting this magic island, death no longer mattering, and turning mutants into this racist, xenophobic, isolationist place, and frame it as good, like Wakanda, but more on the nose. And they have a bunch of horrible villains together with the X-Men just because mutants stick together or something. Also, at least ensure they abduct mutant children when they are born, since mutants are still born randomly in the population. And that thing I've heard about with Xavier and Nathaniel Richards, again, secondhand, but from what I've heard, sounds like total character assassination.
Yeah, okay, so thank you, Dragon Turtle, because I think you refreshed me on several of the points. But yeah, basically the long and the short of it is they tried to basically do a mutant version of BLM, which basically led to a kind of genetic supremacist nonsense, but with mutants instead of races. Um, And yes, it is entirely out of character for Charles to want or enjoy that because the whole point of the dichotomy between Xavier and Magneto back in the day was that Xavier followed the peace and universality and inclusion route, whereas Magneto took the political violence and supremacy and isolationism route. That's the whole reason
Though,
why it. That's the whole reason why it was originally Magneto and not Xavier that came up with Genosha in the first place, because Magneto essentially wanted to, when you cut through the pageantry, have a mutant ethno-state, or to be fair, I guess a mutant refugee state, because coming to it was voluntary after a fashion. So I'm not gonna strawman Magneto.
mhm. um, okay. I don't really have anything. You were saying something, Don, before I cut you off on.
No, go ahead.
Okay. Um, most fans want a departure from the Krakoa storyline that Marvel has botched. They're creating a complete reboot of characters like Iceman, who Marvel's turned gay in recent years in their attempt at identity politics on their readers.
Okay,
I
again,
mean,
I just want to be clear. It's not that he's gay. It's not that they altered his sexuality. It's that they altered his personality along with it. They turned him
yeah,
into a, a flamboyant, lispy, gay-alish twink, basically.
yeah. I was gonna ask how you just.
They ignored the 50 years of continuity where he had preferred women before, which could be solved by the concept of bisexuality if anyone ever gave half a shit about doing this properly.
Uh, Tom Brevoort's announcement was met with mostly grumbles from fans because they've had leftist politics forced on them over the years. That's fair. Though, I'm not going to say political, but if you want to at least have a story that talks about a lot of topics that. I mean, the X-Men have always been kind of a thing that talks about certain topics.
Okay,
Marvel itself.
here's the difference between the way it's done or the way it was done back in the day versus the way it's done now. When it was done back in the day, it was treated like a philosophical issue that had multiple facets, and all parties involved at least had some reasoning for being in whatever position they were in. Now, though, it's a one-sided propagandistic effort where this isn't an unsettled issue that has multiple possible solutions. It is a one settled issue that we have the one correct answer to, and if you disagree with the one correct answer that we've discovered, then you are the lowest scum of the earth and possibly categorically evil, and therefore will be strawmanned into oblivion rather than given any sort of three-dimensional characterization. Because only our perspective allows people to have three-dimensional characterizations. Any perspective other than ours is anti-intellectualism and therefore should be treated as simplistically as possible. Derp.
Right.
That's the difference. Before it was a philosophical issue that was basically a thought experiment or a discussion, whereas now it's one-sided propaganda, which is explicitly political and which strawmans and demonizes anyone outside of the quote unquote correct perspective.
You know what? I will save this thing because it is a sidebar and it's an interesting discussion that we can at least after this article, just because I don't want to waste time on this. I just read that. I just read what you just wrote, Giant Journal.
Yeah, but also the thing about pansexuality, people actually get offended when I refer to myself as bisexual because the difference between pansexual and bisexual is bisexual people are at least allowed to have two different sets of attractiveness standards based on which gender someone is. So, like, for example, I have a different set of qualities that I find attractive in men and a different set of qualities that I find attractive in women. But in the modern zeitgeist, that's actually considered verboten because it reinforces the gender binary because you have two separate standards for two different kinds of people. Pansexuality
Um,
is where the qualities of a person don't matter and you just like sticking your dick in anything that will have you indiscriminately.
uh, yeah, that is also the case. Do you need to explain the difference, or do they know the difference and get offended?
No, they know the difference, and it's that difference that they get annoyed at. That I actually have two separate standards for things that I find attractive in men and things that I find attractive in women. Because
Uh,
how dare I enforce the gender binary with my preferences?
mm. Um, all right. So I'll cover the stuff you were saying earlier, Drentrell. Let me read a little more, and then we'll. Tom Brevoort decided to virtue signal, boding ill for the X-Men franchise's future in his passive-aggressive response to fans' X-Men burnout. He stated X-Men graphic sure brought people out in force. One reminder necessary. Express whatever opinion you like, but if you show up with homophobia or bigotry or speak of any sort, it'll be an instant block.
What if you're gay and also don't want to see the X-Men used as political weapons? Because, hi?
That can't be possible.
Because honestly, I get actually more offended by Iceman turning into a flamboyant twink just because he's gay now than I do from people saying, please treat these characters with consistent personalities and consistent lores with respect and don't just use them as ideological weapons. Because I don't even like the X-Men, but I would like for any stories about the X-Men to be relating to the in-universe logic and established characters of these characters rather than basically just whatever was on the headline of the New York Times this week.
All right. And then let me read this like sentence, and then I'll cover what you said, Drentrell. One fan further concerned about leftist politics being central to the story, to which Brevoort implies it will be a focus of X-Men under his tenure. It's X-Men. The message is the premise, Brevoort tweeted. Okay.
No. See, because again, this once again is down to the distinction between philosophy and politics and the refusal to acknowledge that they're not the same fucking thing. Because you see, back in the day, the X-Men were representative of any marginalized perspective or any marginalized identity, period, which could simply be as simple as a nerd who didn't fit in during his teenage years or whatever. Like, the X-Men were representative of outcasts, but what they were outcast by or for what reason they were outcast could be as nuanced or as specific as you wanted. Because contrary to popular belief, it wasn't originally supposed to be a civil rights allegory, and it wasn't supposed to be a gay rights allegory in the 80s and 90s. It was simply meant to be any variety of outcast. And the fact that these people are so myopically closed-minded that they can only think of people outcast from society in identitarian demographic terms rather than individualistic terms.
As you, I
Go ahead.
Oh, no, I wasn't saying anything. I thought, are you done?
Yeah, no, go ahead.
Oh, okay. Sorry. It was a weird way you ended that sentence. I thought you were going to say more. Okay.
I was, and then I realized I was babbling and that I probably shouldn't. So
Okay. So Giant Turtle, I'm just gonna catch up on the stuff here. I think everyone knows about the ginger side, but fewer people seem to know about the war on bisexuals. You're treated as either gay or straight, depending on what relationship you are currently in. And even if you are banging both at once, people would assume you are some every hole is a goal pansexual.
yeah, there's that.
Um, Yeah, that is also the case. The whole every gay person must be an effeminate twink thing. Yeah, that is weird. Like, I don't really, I will fully admit, I haven't met many gay people in my life. I met a few in high school, and not gonna lie, yeah, they kind of like that. Nothing against them. They were cool people. I didn't interact with them much because, I was a loner in my in my school, in my youth. Still kind of am, so. But, it's a weird thing. Like, I don't think it's like the what's the word? Majority of gay people?
No. There are probably more twinks than there are most other demographics. I will grant that. But here's the problem. I'm going to speak for all bottoms at this particular juncture and say that for the love of God, someone has to be the top, which means generally, obviously there are people with atypical preferences, but as a general rule, the general category is the bottom is the more feminine of the partners, and the top tends to be the more masculine of the partners.
Yeah,
Which means that by not representing any gay people as masculine, you are basically denying the existence of and or preventing access to tops of any kind.
right. Um, and we're not even gonna get. I don't want to get into it just because like it's such a thing. But the whole like making every lesbian like masculine, that whole masculine thing.
Yeah, they have the opposite problem. Every lesbian has to be butch,
Yeah, it's weird.
which
It's weird
again,
and dumb.
the,
Like,
si-
don't get me wrong,
sim,
there are
si-
people like that. I get
yeah,
that, but
similar thing though. If all the lesbians were butch, or all the gay people were effeminate, there would be no gay relationships because, as a general rule, the more butch lesbians want a girly girl, and as a general rule, the feminine gay guys want a fucking top. I know I certainly do. Like people always on dating apps and things, people will assume I'm a top simply because I have like facial hair and stuff. But just because I'm on the more masculine side of bottom presenting, um, doesn't mean that I don't want a masculine guy. I just want someone who is considerably more masculine than me. Like I I've often joked that I am a nerd seeking a jock, basically.
um, yeah, that's true, Giant Turtle. Again, there are just these weird like. Don't get me wrong, stereotypes have some basis in certain things, but it's weird that they try to make like with like SJWs and stuff, they stick to that effectively and never really try to change or
Well,
even
it's got so bad that in order to make a character gay, they actually have to change their personality, which I find absolutely insufferable and insulting because you are assuming then that in order to be gay, you have to be super. Thanks for asking. And yeah,
so
no.
anyway, let's continue.
As I grieve the part of my soul that died when I did that.
Really, I thought you'd be used to saying it by now.
it still hurts me somewhere deep down inside to even mimic that
Oh, I thought that was,
variety of.
I was implying that was your natural default state.
You are really cruising for a bruising tonight, as the old saying goes.
The disdain for fans and lack of concern for titles like X-Men has pushed Marvel Comics into some of its lowest sales in history. The comics industry has been reeling because of rampant political rants inserted into their books. Editors like Tom Brevoort. Cyberfrog creator Ethan Van Sciver made a video of Brevoort's flippant interactions with fans and posits it's a in his YouTube presentation, Van Sciver goes into the psychology of someone like the X-Men editor must have been bullied in high school, and this is a retaliation, some kind of strange power fetish, bullying fans to make him feel. Okay,
Okay, but here's the problem with that approach. Apart from the fact that Ethan Van Sciver is as ever a twat, but that's that's neither here nor there.
I got none for the record.
We're
So I don't want
nerds. Every nerd was at some point the outcast. The issue is that some people seem to think that only their way of approaching certain subject matters is the correct or true or quote unquote intellectual way. And when they're told that that's not true or that they don't represent all of geekdom, then they actually show that in many ways they weren't a true geek. Because a true geek, and yes, I am arbitrating as to what a true geek is, because fuck you, I can do that. A true geek is a meritocrat. A true geek is someone who doesn't give half a shit about someone's demographic or someone's identity. A true geek is someone who is interested in the subject matters because they're cool, because they're interesting, because they're meaningful, and because they're worthwhile on their own terms for their own sake and sans any socio-political gobbledygook. Whereas some people are not in fact geeks, they are hipsters. The main difference between a geek and a hipster is hipsters like everything that geeks like, but they have no sense of depth or inherent meaning to it. They don't understand the idea of liking something for its own sake. They like things only for socio-political, moral, or utilitarian reasons. That is the main difference between a geek and a hipster. And that is why hipsters will, in fact, if I have anything to say about it, get the bullet too. Geek
Oh no, I fucking hate
supremacy over
hipsters.
hipsters is something that I advocate for in its entirety.
I hate hipsters.
Yes. Again, I
I've been,
the one
I,
kind of supremacy that I will allow myself is geek supremacy over hipsters. Where the world where the last of the hipsters have been eradicated is a world that is worth getting to.
hipsters also pick up niche interests, like someone would display exotic animals for guests.
Again, it's the I don't care about this thing for its own on its own terms or for its own sake. I see it only as a moral, socio-political, or like thematic fashion accessory. That is the
What
main
about?
difference between geeks and hipsters.
All right. Tom Brevoort has not publicly commented on Ethan Van Sciver's analysis and has been on a spree of retweets of unrelated content to try and clear his feed of any criticism of the X-Men property from fans.
Like, I know we should
From
focus our ire mostly on Brevoort in this case because he is the idiot du jour, but at the same time, there wasn't really much analysis there. That was just bitchy name calling in Ethan's video.
I'm gonna be completely honest. I got nothing against. either John De La Rose and Ethan Van Sciver. I attention, to be fully honest, to them. Uh, just it wasn't it. Their stuff just wasn't what I got interested in.
And I have my own reasons for disliking John De La Rose and Ethan Van Sciver for completely different reasons. That being said, just because I disagree with them on a bunch of stuff doesn't mean that I can't. It doesn't mean that I can't stand arm in arm with them in the purpose of getting rid of the SJWs. But I'm going to call idiocy wherever I see idiocy, and Ethan's alleged analysis wasn't really very analytical in nature. It was just
Right.
edgy, bratty name calling and tantruming, and
Okay.
that kind of
Um,
shit is not worthwhile, no matter who is doing it.
His current comments, however, it appears that Marvel Comics still hasn't learned their lesson, that their extreme leftist politics are hurting the comics industry and turning off their base of readers. What do you think of Marvel relaunching X-Men with Tom Vibort editing? Yeah.
It's probably going to be lame and horrible, and I'm going to have to do a bunch of bad comic beatdowns with Englentine and LK when they come out, and that will be fine and everything. But yes, Dragon Turtle, I also advocate for Kekistani supremacy. The world will be better off when the entire planet is a Kekistani ethno state. But not this day will that unfortunately be accomplished. So for the time being, I will advocate for the eradication of hipsters, because hipsters are a small enough minority that they can actually be eradicated. And no, I don't mean actually harming physical people. I mean convincing hipsters to stop being hipsters, and or refute their tendencies as much as possible.
Right. Um.
Because I'm more than willing to accept them into the fold of actual geekdom, but they're going to have to become actual geeks first. And I will not accept a hipster in a geek's clothing. Mostly because hipster clothing and geek clothing is unfortunately very indistinguishable. Hence why the main distinguisher between a geek and a hipster is a geek likes things for their own sake, on their own terms, and for meritocratic reasons. A hipster likes things for moral, sociopolitical, and or external fashion reasons, and nothing else. You can usually weed out the difference between geeks and hipsters by using the gamer's credo, get good scrub. Hipsters tend to react rather negatively to the phrase get good scrub. Geeks don't. Geeks chat, yes, get good scrub.
Okay. So the thing I was going to bring up was, well, this is kind of my old pep. Well, with the reboot thing of like, I I assume most of us are pretty tired of the reboots.
Yeah, again, half of the okay, not half of the problem, but like 30%, like maybe a third of the problem is the constant need for events and or reboots. There
Yeah.
there is no such thing as day-to-day continuity anymore, and it sucks.
Right. Okay. God, dude. Sorry. Um. But this was just going to bring up related to X-Men. And I've thought about this before. I don't know if we've ever had this discussion here, but logically, okay, let's say the X-Men existed in the 60s as they were introduced, or late 60s, right?
Mm-hmm.
Was it late or early 60s they were introduced?
I want to say late 60s. But wait, hold on. When were they actually introduced? That's a good question. I'm going to try while you're finding that, I'm gonna try to use the bathroom again because hopefully my brother's out of the shower by now.
Okay.
But research that so that we know what year the X-Men came out.
September 1963. Okay, so it was early 60s.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I'll be
All
back.
right. Yeah. And so the thing since you're still here trying to turn, I don't want it to be just dead air. I'll re-explain it for Dalton when he gets back. Uh, the idea was, okay, X-Men show up in the early 60s. And since Marvel is supposed to be an echo of our own world, and let's just say the X-Men happen, like logically speaking, I'm under the impression that within, let's say, roughly the 2000s, by that time, given the decades between the initial appearance of the X-Men and to 2000s, more than likely mutants will not be, just like how the civil rights movement happened. I'm not doing the comparison, obviously, I'm just using it as an example. But mutants would be seen, I in my most optimistic mindset, I would say the mutants would be just become another facet of culture and humanity and yada yada. Just how it is. And I honestly do think the X-Men would become more popular with like the younger crowds, obviously. Uh, and it makes me think, like, I really would like to see a series that actually tackled like the true public impact, like the public image of like the X-Men and mutants and stuff. And I do think that has happened, but I'm just talking like a long form story of that, like through the generations and stuff. And I'm not doing like Days of the Future Past thing or anything, but like the legit like social, societal ramifications of that. Um, and just uh, kind of, kind of, I guess I'm talking situation IRL sort of, but it kind of would be in universe as well. Like if you're to logically use the basis of our world, mm, see that's what I, okay, logically again, my idea would be preferably that it isn't a sliding timeline. Uh, well, to be fair, Marvel is supposed to be very in line with in real life, so I guess sort of. I wouldn't say allegory, but okay. I guess basically what I'm trying to boil it down to is that I don't think in modern day the X-Men should be mutants and X-Men should not be persecuted as I think it's been shown. Sure, there's still dumbasses who hate them for some possible logical reason of like the mutants are the next stage of human evolution, and I mean look at what happened to the Homo sapiens and the Homo the Neanderthals. I can't remember the actual terminology for them. So it's the logic of, because of nature, humanity will technically die out eventually, which in some ways could be understandable. I don't agree with it personally, but it's at least an understanding belief. But again, I do think with the appearance of the X-Men, which it was kind of supposed to be a symbol for mutants being something that is good, that they should not be persecuted. You know, they're superheroes, right? Um, they, and again, let's say roughly. Yeah, yeah, I agree. But even with humans, like humanity, like the younger generations would very much idealize and look up to the X-Men and mutants as a whole that do the whole superhero teams and stuff. Um, and again, it's just like that kind of thing of like they. Sorry, I'm losing my words here. The mindset that the generation that was introduced, like the people in the 60s, like Stryker and stuff, like those people who were trying to fight the mutants. Yeah, that's completely fair. Uh, ironically, I think I don't know if you know what My Hero Academia is, but I remember someone saying that it was fairly similar to the uh, what would like it's somewhat like what happens after all the persecution stuff, like for the X-Men and stuff, like that. Um, but yeah, I do see your point. I get it. Yeah. It's not a bad show. Personally, I watch the abridged stuff more. There's like this abridged series that's really great. I would say I wouldn't say it's on the I wouldn't say it's on par with like DBZ abridged, but it's pretty good.
Okay, I'm back.
Hey.
1 second.
Yep.
Sorry that took so long.
Oh, we were good. Um, so, yeah, Dragon Turtle and I were just discussing the. This is weird. Usually, I'm the one who's gone, and you, okay, but we were discussing the thing I wanted to discuss was, logically speaking, if the X-Men existed in 1963 and we kept that as a through line instead of rebooting them constantly, right? Like in a realistic manner, in terms of societal and cultural change, mutants, thanks to the pavement of the X-Men, would not be looked at like, say, in our generation. I don't think they would be looked at as negatively.
Well, and this goes to something that I always wanted for the X-Men, which is what about a story? This is something that I've always thought about ever since I watched the first X-Men movie back in like what 2001, 2002, something like that. If the mutants are quote the next step forward in human evolution, then I would expect to see two things from either Xavier's camp or Magneto's camp. One, I would expect to see probably Magneto because he's far more of an activist for like mutant kind. He would probably need to advocate for mutants to have as much as okay, how to phrase this in a way that's not going to get us yeeted from YouTube. By rights, Magneto should be advocating that mutant kind outbreed vanilla Homo sapiens. because that's how evolution works. And the second thing we would see in an X-Men style scenario is, given that procreation is how evolution works, shouldn't we also see a skirmish or a feud or a war between different kinds of mutants? Because everyone who has a mutant power has a different mutant power, therefore a different potential next evolution for humanity. So not only should we see mutants, especially activist mutants like Magneto, advocating for mutant breeding as much as possible,
Right.
but also there should be quite a lot of warfare between different kinds of mutants with different kinds of mutations, because if the mutants are indeed supposed to be the next leap forward in human evolution, then the next question is, okay, one, we need to outbreed as many vanilla humans as we can, and two, once that job is done, which of our mutations is actually the best adaptation for humanity moving forward? In which case, you would see a lot of mutant on mutant violence to basically Highlander themselves, because of course, of all of these mutations, there really only can be one at the end of the day.
Right. So, okay, Drentrell said genetic imperialism, as Sargon put it. That's what you were saying.
Yeah.
Yeah, and from what I understand, it is all the same X gene, just different expressions. Also, is the X gene recessive or dominant, or something more complex? If recessive, humans are unlikely to go anywhere without some choline.
Right, but okay, my point is, even if it's all the same gene and different expressions of that same gene, they're all different mutations of it. Hence, if we're playing the next step forward in human evolution, where if we're playing the chips where they lie, there should be another hominid war as a result of the emergence of the X gene.
Also, Drentrell, why wouldn't you want a diverse gene pool with various powers in the population?
Because, again, if we're talking about the next stage of human evolution, there can only be one most dominant of all the expressions of the X gene. Granted, the reality benders have a massive easier time when it comes to this. So that question is going to get answered with a it's the reality benders very, very quickly. But
okay, sorry, I do think you were somewhat repeating.
Mm-hmm.
Though Drentrell and I were discussing more of societal and cultural changes than actual like evolutionary things.
Right.
Okay, so can I?
Sorry.
What I was putting past the idea of like as generations happen again, let's say to the point where we're born, our generation, right? Well, you're millennial, I'm a Zoomer, as much as I hate saying that. Roughly, I posed it from like the 1963 to the 2000s, like say roughly 2000, right? That's what, like about is that 40
I
years?
mean, you don't even have to stretch it. You don't even have to stretch it that far, because back in the day there was the civil rights movement and there was the gay rights movement, and look at the way particularly Zoomers approach black people and gay people. It's basically who cares?
Yeah, I don't give a shit as long as you're not a piece of shit. Yeah, as long as you're not a piece of shit, I don't give a shit.
And if we're honest with ourselves, and this kind of ties back into my thing, and that's why I kind of took it in the way I took it. Are you honestly telling me that if you had an option to date a superpowered being, you wouldn't take it? Or at the very least, those superpowered beings wouldn't be considered very, very attractive?
Right. Okay, you are weird. in those regards. I know that much.
Right, but my point is that okay, you have let's think about this logically again. Even irrespective of my whole Magneto should be trying to outbreed the human race thing, which he should be, but that's neither here nor there. Um, you're telling me that suddenly, like what, 10-20% of the human population starts evidencing superhuman powers,
Right. I also, sorry,
and
there's also,
that's not going to change the dating market at all. I that's silly to me.
I mean, you're not wrong on that regard, but some people would be intimidated or fear the complications of dating someone with superpowers, let alone superpowered toddlers. That's completely fair, Giant Turtle.
The X gene doesn't turn on until puberty generally.
Generally, yeah, it
Being the
depends.
operative word.
But there was also some Giant Turtle, and I would say we take more about 10 or 15 so more minutes discussing this, and then we can move on to the next thing. But Giant Turtle brought up the interest thing as it like would go on, right, with the power, with like the mutant stuff and all, that it would eventually mirror the debate over gun control a bit, given the powers, especially if like in some settings there are ways to neutralize them like cuffs and stuff.
See, at that point, I'm on the X-Men 3 side of the thing. Even though I would hope that I'm not a mutant in this hypothetical timeline, because my thing is magic. I don't need fucking mutant powers. If my significant other has mutant powers, so much the better. But I don't want them. My point is that, and now I forgot what my point was. Shit. God damn it. Oh, now I remember, because you brought up the suppression thing. I go the X-Men 3 route. I stand with the mutants who don't need a cure. Like, for as much as that was very obviously supposed to be kind of a gay allegory, I do wholeheartedly, even in this hypothetical future where mutants have become more common, I'm on the they don't need a cure
And I actually also
part of
brought,
the argument.
oh, that also, well, he also brought this up, and I still need to check that out. By the way, Giant Troll, he brought up this story of Worm slash Ward, which is like a superhero like fiction thing.
Right.
You know what that is?
Yeah.
Okay.
Dragon Turtle has worm pilled me on several occasions.
Yeah. A lot of people do question the whole, hey, should we be worried that a bunch of people, including some unstable people, have superpowers? You know, because given the randomness of the X gene, certain people can develop very dangerous abilities that should not have those abilities. So again,
Because villains are villains and they're going to do
yeah.
villainous things.
But yeah, it's interesting to like think about all the little facets of what would happen if the X-Men did exist.
Or even if the writers bothered to take the concept seriously for 5 minutes, which they almost never do.
But like you really think long-term effects of that, which I think are more interesting.
And again, back to my side of the argument here. We already have people who have like furry fetishes and giant fetishes, even now, when for the most part we don't have mutants in our civilization. I
Oh
mean,
my
we do.
god, I'm sorry. My generation would be so fucking weird, even more so than they already are. If mutants were real, my god.
I'm just saying we already have the furry or the growth or the vor or the various other subcultures,
like
even without
I'm not shaming anyone for those. Like there's in those. That is not my thing.
But my point is that we have those even now when we don't have a really supportable mutant population. You're telling me that in a world where you actually can get the 8-foot muscle bound dudes or the people who were born with fur or whatever, like those people those types of mutants would in fact exist in this hypothetical universe. And
I, what's weird is
speaking as someone who definitely would get with Colossus without a second thought. Yeah, no, they at least and especially among fetish subcultures, mutants would be well on their way to breeding humanity out of existence.
oh, hold on.
And good for them.
Oh god damn it, Drake Turtle.
Colossus is cute. Shush.
No, I wasn't talking to you. I was talking about Giant Troll, and that's just the physically manifesting stuff. How many people want some hot Kryptonian mommy or someone who can move things with their mind? Y'all some degenerates.
Oh, are we, Mr. I Could Redeem Azula?
That's not me being a degenerate. That's just me being a genuinely nice person who wants to help a woman who is genuinely broken.
And Shigo and Lynn and
that's for next week. Okay, but yeah, that's fair. Dragon Turtle is mentioned, plus the people who take it on as an alternate form, like the mutant power woman who can transform into a werewolf. Oh, God, what is her name? Fuck, I know. Wolfsbane.
Wolfsbane.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, again, transformation and or growth subcultures are a thing already. So,
but I also brought up the fact that My Hero Academia is kind of an X-Men universe that has gone to the logical conclusions.
Yeah.
Of like the X-Men, for all the stories we've seen, is kind of the beginning of that, while My Hero Academia is kind of the logical evolution of the
another I will throw in here that is even more in the early stages than the X-Men usually is, but the Eastrail 177 universe, aka the M. Night Shyamalan superhero universe.
Yeah, that's fair. But again, like,
which, by the way, is his best franchise. Full stop.
Okay. But again, I do legitimately think, like, from a logical perspective, given the decades, by our generation, we would not see mutants as, I mean, depending on how you're raised, obviously.
But as a general rule, there would probably even be a subset of people who thought that mutants were better than vanilla humans, because, well, I mean, in several ways they sort of are.
Yeah, that's completely fair. Dragon Turtle brings up within My Hero Academia, quirkless people, regular people are the minority now, because I think at the time of the story starts, it's 80% of people have a power or quirk, as they're called.
Which, as Dragon Turtle points out, probably wouldn't be the case for a very, very long time in the X-Men universe, because it's possible that the X gene is recessive to some degree. Although people who, like, when two people with the X gene get together, it's almost a virtual certainty that their kids will have powers, and that those powers will actually present stronger than either of the two parents. So,
and there's also, I think
the jury is still very much out on the whole Punnett square of it all.
Though it also does bring up the thing about there is something about worrying quirks will keep getting more powerful and more difficult to control the quirk singularity, which I believe, again, I'm going off secondhand knowledge here because I haven't read the manga, unfortunately, and I haven't watched the show in some time, except for like there's this really great abridged series doing something really amazing with the property. But what I was going to say was there's also the thing you got to bring up, the God damn it, I'm losing my fucking train of thought here. Well, the idea, granted, I'm sure the X gene does something with a person's body that makes them able to handle their own ability. While with a quirk in My Hero Academia, quirks are getting more powerful that sometimes the body isn't prepared enough. The body hasn't evolved enough to adapt to it.
Well, yeah, that's a good point. Usually, a mutation comes with several secondary or tertiary mutations that most people don't even think of, let alone all the secondary mutations that actually are almost as powerful or equally as powerful as the primary one. Which,
Yeah. Um, but yeah, that does raise the question of like, if again, logically speaking, over the generations, as because logic again, it would make sense that the powers, if more mutants were like how you mentioned that mutants were outbreeding humanity, basically, wouldn't the powers get kind of stack upon each other and get more? Uh,
if yeah, especially if different kinds of mutants are interbreeding, which again is why I do wonder why there has never been a story where Magneto goes, "Wait, why am I advocating for general mutant rights when everyone has a different mutation? Shouldn't I be advocating specifically for my mutation being the best of them?"
yeah. I think some people will always be against mutants. They are different and more so. I mean, yeah, you're always gonna have people. I mean, even today we have dumbass, people, not dumbass, but people who are against certain other groups of people. Not gonna, it's just like how it
People,
is.
stupid people will always be stupid, but
Right. There was, ironically, I watched this from Law and Order, so I know it's a weird little thing to pick up, but there's a quote from one of the episodes I had watched where we're done from the legal stage in terms of civil rights. I'm paraphrasing, of course, but the
Mhm.
line that stuck with me is we're in the hearts and minds stage right now, which
Yeah,
takes a lot longer to change.
yeah. Although again, the X-Men do have, or the mutants have a benefit in that in quite a lot of cases the mutations are inarguably superior to vanilla human anatomy. So that will at least counteract some of the inherent new factor.
Right. Um,
Because I'm gonna be honest, ever since we started talking about this, I have been doing naughty things to the Ultimate Universe Colossus, who happens to be gay, pretty much since we started this conversation.
you are a horny motherfucker.
I'm sorry, there aren't enough people who are like 6'7" or taller and built like trucks. So like
So
I have a lot of pent up freaking sexuality that has nowhere to go at the moment. So there's that.
best friend, everyone. Uh,
Hey, you don't blame me for your choices in friends, dude.
but again, from a cultural standpoint, I think in the Ultimate Universe, the X-Men were seen as, I mean, you kind of would have a boy situation as well, with like the superheroes being seen as like the X-Men and stuff would be seen as celebrities. Obviously not to the degree that the boys, the how
Well,
they
but I
portray
mean,
them.
there is also the other aspect, and I wish they would address this more than they do, but they don't. Like in a universe like the Marvel universe, where there are so many different like aberrations to humanity, there are aliens, there are extra dimensional beings, there are immortals of every different stripe, and so on and so forth. Why is it mutants specifically that freak people out? Now, my headcanon justification that may or may not have been based on stuff from the actual canon at one point is that the reason why some humans are freaked out by mutants is because there's kind of a factor similar to the uncanny valley sort of situation, and there's the possibility that they know on some intuitive level that mutants are replacements. So there might be some of that, which would be really interesting if they actually went into that more. I know there have been storylines where they have touched on that some. Like I said, this is mostly my headcanon, but I'm pretty sure it was based on the actual canon at some point. Um, the idea that the main reason why humans are afraid of mutants more so than they are afraid of aliens and every other kind of abnormality in the Marvel universe is because it triggers something akin to the uncanny valley, and on some level, the average human recognizes that the mutant is the, you know, next leap forward in evolution, which definitely would be a thing. Although, again, I would weigh that against the appealing nature of banging something that was literally superhuman in most cases, or maybe not most cases, but
Um,
in quite a lot of cases.
I mean, General does bring up the interesting point, and I did bring up the evolution, like the comparison between the Homo sapiens and the Neanderthals, or
Mhm.
whatever their actual term the term was for those people. Not the term for them, the Homo erectus, I think.
That was several
Okay,
iterations before Neanderthals.
I right. Okay, but
Um,
again, my
I
point.
don't, I don't, I don't remember the scientific name for Neanderthals off the top of my head.
Yeah, but giant turtle. I think it's because most of those things are either rare or the majority of them are far away. Oh yeah, this is an alien, but there are only three of his species within 300,000 light years. That sounds fair.
Well, but mutants are also relatively rare, at least in terms of the continuity has always specified that they're like between like 5 and 10% of the population, so relatively rare.
Yeah. Um.
You're
Again, it's
you're you're about as likely to come across a mutant in the Marvel universe as you are a gay person in the IRL universe. So
mm,
like there's
uh.
I always, like I said, I think this might have been canon at one point. I don't know if it's canon anymore or when specifically it was canon, but I do like the idea of some kind of evolutionary um uncanny valley similar to that which would have existed between Homo sapiens and Neanderthals kind of thing.
uh sorry.
But at the end of the day, I do generally think that it would be it, at the very least it would be an interesting Elseworlds to do like an X-Men hominid war or something. That even sounds like a badass title.
I think it would have to be.
It
Honestly,
it,
it sound like
it would have to be a what if or an Elseworld. I know, but it's
yeah.
like it annoys me because they're like just playing the mutant idea as straight as possible. There's so much creative, interesting potential for the mutants in the Marvel universe, and yet all we can do is, oh, they're an allegory for my historical oppression, and therefore rinse and repeat forever. Like, there's a lot of really interesting stories that, honestly, you'd have to do like the old like adult Marvel label was Max, I think. You'd have to do like a Marvel Max to actually take it to the places I would want to go with it, but or like a Black Label if this were DC we were talking about. But it's such an interesting idea, and it
Uh,
does make Magneto seem like a bit of an idiot that he hasn't even tried the
yep.
let's outbreed Homo sapiens approach.
All right, Drentel, I think the problem with what Dolan is saying is that I'm pretty sure the people attracted to the exotic is rare, and the majority are biased towards the similar for sexuality and beyond. Just no incest. Uh, Dolan, no offense, but I think you are getting genetics and gene pools wrong with your mutant hominid war idea.
Again, I do generally think that step one in a hypothetical Magneto wins universe would be he tries to convince mutants to outbreed humans as much as possible, and step two would be him realizing, wait a minute, everyone's mutation is different. So in order to actually stabilize human evolution, we have to decide which of our mutations is the most beneficial. Which, of
Uh,
course, the reality benders end up winning, but duh.
right. Um, okay, so I do think if at some point you guys might want to, if you guys want to actually have this conversation, just because it is almost 11,
Yeah,
and I do think,
we have things. We at
yeah,
least have the Avatar trailer to do,
yeah.
which
Uh,
I'm mixed on. I want to be optimistic, but at this point, I'm very, very cautious about that optimism. We lost Brainstormer. Oh dear. I mean, yeah, there probably would be inbreeding between the various kinds of mutant. I'm just wondering why no one has ever thought to themselves, wait, if we're supposed to be the next step forward in human evolution and everybody has a different mutation, shouldn't we be like fighting each other to see whose mutation is best? At which point the reality benders steamroll everyone and that's the end of the story, but
All right,
it would
sorry.
still be an interesting story to tell, at least as a one-off.
To be fair, Dragon Turtle, I am sure you guys have more brains than I do. To be fair.
Shut up.
Sorry, I pressed the wrong button. I got sent to another page by accident. I'm good now.
Womp, 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 womp.
Yeah. All right, let me. Okay. Yeah, the Avatar: Last Airbender official trailer for the live action. I sent this in because apparently I did it before Dawn.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously we were going to cover this just because we've been talking about this for a while, and we covered the teaser trailer.
And I think for both of us, Avatar was a very formative franchise. I was 12 when it originally came out.
I was clearly younger. Though, and I remember watching it. I think I enjoyed it. Don't get me wrong, but I think to truly understand it, I had to have rewatched it when I was older to really, just because. God, okay. If you were 12 when it came out, I would have been
8.
Yeah,
4
around
years
8.
difference.
Yeah, around 8. And I'm not gonna lie, this might come as a shock to people, but I was like a very hyperactive kid. I know you don't know what that's like, Dalton, but
No, I know what it's like. I had brothers. And my first brother, the older of my 2 younger brothers, was a complete and utter nightmare as a kid.
and I meant you personally.
I had shit to do as a kid. Usually watching TV and or reading.
But yeah, at that time,
I didn't have any time or energy to be hyper.
But at that time, again, I was 8 years old. I didn't really have much life experience, so I don't think I really paid much attention to the show. Although I will fully admit, first seeing Azula, it awoken things in me. Shut up. Everyone knows this about me. I'm not hiding it. 8 years old,
Once again, I reserve the right to bloodbend her if she ever does anything nasty to you.
But 8 years old, I knew that was the type of woman I liked, for better or worse.
And he has not changed in the preceding, 15 or 16 years.
Okay, I'm 24 now, so that'd be... Hold on. Shout out, Dragon Turtle.
8 times 2 is 16. Okay, 8 times 3 is 24. So 16 years.
Okay, just to make sure. Yeah, 24 minus 8. Yeah, 16. Okay. It's funny you bring that up, Dragon Turtle. You'll find out that statement is kind of foreshadowing for next week.
Yeah, we're the
Hold on,
year.
I don't want to spoil it. I don't want to spoil it. Don.
Okay, we won't spoil it.
Um, but yeah, I guess we're both just kind of on the fence about this before we like get into the trailer itself. Like the live action Avatar: Last Airbender thing. You know, we're kind of on the fence about this. It doesn't look bad, but it's not like we're not over the moon about it, right?
It looks either like not enough effort was put into it or not enough money was put into it. I don't know which.
I honestly would say not enough, possibly not enough money. I could somewhat sense the passion, but
Like either they're trying to do their best and they just don't have enough to work with, or they're or they have the money and they're just not using it well. In any case, I'm annoyed because I really want this to do well, and it looks really, to me it looks very cheap, and
I
just
won't
just because
I,
just because it looks cheap doesn't mean it was cheap. It could just be that they didn't spend it could just be that they didn't spend the money in the right places.
or they
But
weren't given enough. I mean, it's the first season of a live action adaptation. Any type of adaptation Netflix does, they never really give enough money.
granted, the bending from season 1 was also minimalist compared to the bending in seasons 2 or 3.
Yeah, that's fair.
But I really do want to see this done well, and the fact that it looks cheap is not a good sign for me.
Yeah. Although, again, I think we can all agree it looks massively better than the movie.
Yes, but that bar is buried several fathoms deep in the earth.
I'm trying to be optimistic here, man. Humor me for like
I
a
know,
minute.
I know, but
Humor me.
I just like I'm one of those people who's like, if you can't do it right, don't do it at all. So it's just I don't like seeing things that I love cheaply copied.
Oh, okay.
Is the
And
thing.
for the record, Giant Turtle, I'm also attracted to Raven, and she is not a fucking psychopath. I'm sorry. It's just that comment was just sticking in my mind every time I looked at it.
I mean, also, I mean, to be fair, I also was attracted to Raven as a kid, so there's
Like,
that.
no offense to Starfire, she was cool. I wouldn't have mind hanging out with her and being a friend of hers.
She's too hyper. I couldn't deal with her.
I,
Yeah, Raven is cool.
I'm sorry, I like strong men. And Zula, I'm not getting this. What I explained so many times.
You're
I will not be judged.
you're glitching, Brainstormer. You're glitching really, really badly, or at least you are on my end.
Can you hear me now?
It's better, but you're still glitching.
Can you now?
Yes, now you're fine. Unfortunately, unfortunately, Dragon Turtle Optimus Prime is a machine, so that's probably a no. If only he were biologically human and still that tall, then we would be talking. But unfortunately, Optimus is a machine, and I am not a robosexual. Then again, I have no problem being attracted to Albert from How to Build a Better Boy, or is it Alex Davenport from Lab Rats, the big one? Those who I have no problem with. So maybe it's just they need to be more humanoid-ish rather than not being robosexual specifically. But yeah, no, Optimus is cute and all, but the machine parts are a turn off. And we lost Brainstormer again. Yes, I would gladly do Android 16. Actually, I would gladly do either 16 or 17. 18 is cute and all, but she's not on my would bang list necessarily. Now, if she was flirting with me, that might be a different story, but yeah, as a general rule, like 16 or 17 would be fine.
Okay, I'm back. Hello.
Yes, now I can hear you fine. I think so can Dragon Turtle.
Yeah. Okay, Drendro, can you hear me? Yeah, sorry. I my connection was weird, so I left and just kind of restarted. So
it's okay. You missed Dragon Turtle trying to set me up with sex bots.
I mean, to be fair, they're actually cyborgs, not androids.
Shush.
I mean, that's even like actually canon. Like, I'm not just
Yes,
talking.
I know, but shut up. I get the joke, and it was well done in DBZ Abridged as well. But I have called them androids since I was 5 years old, and I'm not changing now.
Well, no, what I mean
Also,
is they're not like full robots. Is what I'm saying. That's what I meant.
well, that depends on how thoroughly the tech upgrades were, but yeah. The upshot is I would not bang Optimus Prime because too many machine parts, but I would gladly do Adam.
16. Sorry,
But
I thought it was 18.
I would gladly do 16 or 17 from DBZ, or Albert from How to Build a Better Boy, or Adam Davenport from Lab Rats.
Right. See, I'll be honest. I knew you weren't going to go for Optimus, but I was actually looking at more personality wise.
What's wrong with his personality that you think I wouldn't find attractive?
Well, he's upstanding, he's moral, and to be fair, he's actually, depending on the version, he's actually quite the scholar and intelligent. I know you don't really prefer brains when it comes to men, so.
I don't prefer brains when it comes to men, largely because that means I would have something to contribute to the relationship.
Fair enough. That's basically where I was going with it, so.
Yeah. Well, yeah, of the Autobots, he might not be my preferred. Like, if I was
Also,
in the market for a giant sex bot,
you are a morally gray, manipulative, borderline supervillain. So,
yes,
personality-wise, again, I do not think you guys would mix well.
like paragons aren't an issue. I actually prefer my boyfriends to be more moral than me, and paragons and upstanding and shit. I
Okay,
just prefer them to also be a little ditzy so that I actually have something to contribute to the relationship.
fair enough. So you might prefer Bulkhead or Ironhide.
Still, though, Autobots have way too much machine parts for me. Like, again, if I was to do robots, they would have to have more human parts. Like, again, think of Adam Davenport from Lab Rats, Android 16 or 17 from DBZ, or Albert from How to Build a Better Boy.
That's a completely fair point, Dragon Turtle. I think at this point, Android in Dragon Ball is just a in-universe term for artificial beings. I mean, even Cell was a bio-android. Yeah, that's completely fair.
I would in fact do Cell if
Perfect
if
Cell.
so if Cell was flirting with me, then I would definitely say yes, especially Perfect Cell, because I mean genetically perfect is certainly very very hot.
Right. Okay, it's not even February yet, and we're already talking like this kind of crap. God damn it. Okay, we're moving on to fucking Avatar: Last Airbender. No one say shit about Azula anymore. Okay, I'm done defending myself. I've stated my reasons why I like her. Fuck off.
I do wonder what's going to happen when they cast a live action version of her in season 2 of this show, though. Think Brainstormer might have to mute his mic for a little bit when we see her in the trailer for
Okay.
season 2, assuming this gets to season 2.
For the record, it would be kind of weird because if they're casting towards the actual character's age, granted, when I was 8 when it came out. She was in her teens, which was significantly older than me at the time.
Mm-hmm.
But, I would not feel anything towards the live action version. I'll be fully honest.
Age doesn't, as long as they're not like prepubescent, age doesn't really make much of a difference to me.
Firebenders are really hot. Shut the fuck up,
Okay. Honestly, Earthbenders are cuter for me, but that's just me.
Oh, you like them big and dumb.
I do.
Yeah, so case closed. I guess I
mean, talk about guys being rock solid. Jesus.
Shut. God damn it. I mean, I do admire the passion of Firebenders, so yeah.
I mean, there's nothing to say that Firebenders couldn't be cute. I've never seen a Firebender who I thought was cute in the anime, so.
Really, not even Zuko.
I mean, he's okay, but he's a little bit skinny for my taste. If he was like flirting with me and willing to bulk up for me, then that's a different story. But yeah, he's a bit skinny for my taste.
That's fair, Drenchel. Typical practice to cast people older than the actual age who can pass as that age. Yeah, that's completely fair. I mean, Robbie Amell, as Dawn always likes to point out.
He has played someone in his early teens or in his late teens or early 20s for like the last 30 years.
Yeah. Anyway, shall we? Wait, hold on. God damn it. I need to make sure I have the audio. What about Buff Iroh?
No, he's too old. Youth is very attractive to me. Obviously, not so young that it gets into ew territory, but as a general rule, people like between like 16 and 18 are cute for me, which is the age of consent in most places in the world. So don't freaking get grossed out all of a sudden.
All right. Shall we? Fuck, what? Cabbages, right? Cabbages.
Cabbages.
Yep.
Cabbages, my cabbages.
I swear to God, if they don't have the cabbage merchant in here, we'll fucking riot.
No, cities will seriously be on fire. There will be no like. There are very few things that would get me into like Antifa and start setting things on fire and throwing bricks territory, but
like, I understand wanting to be maybe a little more mature for live action, maybe, but yet you can't cut out the fucking cabbage merchant.
You know what would be really good is if the cabbage merchant was played by one of the original voice actors. Like, imagine if Don Tabasco, the voice actor for Zuko, played the cabbage merchant in this.
Oh, that would be so fucking funny! Holy shit!
Now that I've said it, it must be the case, or I'm gonna be pissed now. Or actually, no. Even better would be
The guy who played Sokka?
No, the guy who played, or rather, the guy who dubbed in Iroh's lines after Mako sadly was no
Pat?
more.
Yeah.
Um, I really wish he got to finish out that role, but what's his name? Is it Joe or George DiMaggio that is the guy who? Because he also was the guy who replaced Mako for the voice of Aku in season 5 Samurai Jack.
Or Joe. Yeah, George DiMaggio.
Yeah, because he also played Bender and several other characters. Like he would be a good choice to have play the Cabbage Merchant. Although I will say that
He wasn't Aku.
wasn't he?
No, I don't think so.
Who was the replacement voice actor for Aku in season 5 of Samurai Jack? Because it was Mako.
Same guy.
It was Mako in the original. It was Mako in the original series, and then of course Mako died before completing Avatar. So, because I'm pretty sure it was the same guy who finished off Iroh that finished off Aku for Mako.
No, Greg Baldwin.
Yeah, have him be the Cabbage Merchant. But irrespective of which of the legacy voice actors you have playing the Cabbage Merchant, somebody better be playing the freaking Cabbage Merchant, or cities will be on fire.
Or, you motherfuckers! I swear to God, if you don't put the Cabbage Merchant in here, shit's gonna fucking happen.
I'm setting things on fire if there's no Cabbage Merchant in the show.
Yeah. So cabbage.
We shall cabbage. My cabbages.
The Fire Nation is embarked on a dark path, and the world might never recover. The world needs the Avatar. It needs you, Aang.
I don't really have anything to say to that. Visuals looked better, I will say.
They're better. I wish there was. The issue isn't even like the quality of the visuals. It's the stylization that's missing.
Yeah, I will say it's a bit flat in terms of like colors and lighting a bit.
And it's not because you can't transition certain things to live action.
No, okay, like I mean color grading for the coloring, the colors look a little dim. I won't say like they're not washed out. I won't say that. They don't look washed out, but they're not as colorful or bright as I think they could be.
Yeah, like
what Avatar is, it had an amazing use of color.
Yeah, and there was a show when I was a kid that was live action. It was called Legend of the Seeker. It was based on the Terry Goodkind Sword of Truth novels, and they barely had $1 million budget per episode. But because of clever use of things like lighting, sets, and stylization, they were able to make a more distinctive look, even without a lot of money to play with. So yeah, it's not necessarily even cheapness. It's
also,
just they should have put a little bit more effort in stylization than they did.
Right, and the lighting as well is a little weird for like the CGI, because that kind of helps sell the CGI as more tangible. It just does not look as
epic. Yeah, as grand as and yeah, the light should definitely be bigger. Like this shot should basically just be Aang in the light tunnel. Which, granted, in the actual show they might do it. It might be.
I'm not talking about the light tunnel itself. I'm talking about the lighting overall from the scenes of CGI.
Around, yeah, I know what you mean. But like, yeah, Granted, in the show there might be better shots of it because trailers do have a tendency to chop things up a little bit, but
Yeah.
someone should have said something to the effect of, "We should make sure this is colorized and stylized enough that it still has that epic quality."
Although I am, because they are showing it a lot. The destruction. I wonder if it's going to be the opening to the series of the destruction of the Air Temple, because that's not something we got to see in the original. Obviously, um,
I think they're mostly gonna keep it the same, which means there'll probably be a episode similar to the Storm here. I think.
well, no, they went to the Air Temple before the storm.
They did,
Yeah, so
because that's when they picked up Momo, and that's the first time we saw Aang in the Avatar state. Where Katara had to talk him down. But I think according to the showrunners, they decided to keep it more serialized than, or yeah, more plotline focused than the show did. So they're probably going to cut out some of the like one-off adventures. But
hey, we ain't gonna see uh, the divide, so that's good.
like that episode was smart for the like political allegory it was trying to do, but it's still probably the worst episode of the entire show. Which,
Mm.
granted, it is an episode that I revisit a lot because it seems like so much of our current state of affairs is basically with the Zhang, like it's the Zhang and the Ganjin thing of, well, we brought food in because we assumed that our enemy would assume that we were low in base and bring food in themselves. So why should our people go hungry just because the other people aren't trustworthy? It's that I know I'm doing a bad thing, but I assumed that my enemy would assume that I would do a bad thing and decide to do the bad thing themselves. So therefore, everyone does the wrong thing. I fucking so much of our political zeitgeist is, yes, we all know that this is mutually a bad thing, but everyone also knows that everyone else is also doing the bad thing. Therefore, everyone should do the bad thing, otherwise they'll be left out.
So moving on.
And then everyone gets fed to the canyon crawler because they all are mutually doing the one thing they know they should be doing. I know. Yeah, but cabbages.
Cabbages.
The Fire Nation has destroyed everything in their path. If the world is going to have any chance, it's going to need Aang.
So, like,
The music is helping. The music is helping a whole lot.
so two things from me. Costumes look fine. They're actually like a brilliant translation of like from the show to live action. They look pretty accurate. However, bringing up the music, it could be just because it's starting, but I don't think it has the punch.
The grandeur, yeah.
Yeah, again, that could be just because it just started, so I could be wrong, and I'd be willing to retract that statement.
Well, it's also not really showing the epic parts yet, so
yeah,
they might just be saving the epic orchestral versions for later, which, I mean, yeah, that makes sense, kind of. I do like the style choice of Aang's arrow, though. Like that's one live action update that does work, I think.
I mean, it does look exactly like the original, but I think I mentioned the last time we when we talked about the trailer, I actually kind of would have preferred like a mixture of the original with the design that was in the M Night Shyamalan one. Because for all its faults, it actually had a really cool
Yeah,
arrow.
it was the single it was the single grain of gold in the shit heap that was the M Night Shyamalan one. And again, M Night Shyamalan has done stuff that I like. I really like his superhero trilogy, but what the fuck were you thinking, M Night? Seriously.
Mhm. Again, that I will say that I think it's just because it had a more of a Eastern,
Tibetan vibe, yeah.
yeah,
Looked almost like a mandala pattern.
yeah. So that's like the one good thing I liked about that movie was the design of Aang's arrows, like his tattoo.
Yeah, it was the one thing that it was like, okay, well done, M Night. You get one creative choice correct in the entire shit heap that was the rest of it, but okay.
Because, like, I'm gonna be fully honest. This just feels like it's painted on, right? It does not feel like a legit. Because with the tattoos, I mean,
Tattoo.
yeah. Because the Aeromads, I don't remember what fighting style they were supposed to be based off, but it's supposed to be the Aeromads are supposed to be relatively, some type of monk. I do want to say Tibetan, but I'm not too sure of that. Shaolin, possibly.
Shaolin. Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't know. It's just like this feels like I said, it does feel painted on. It feels just like something that can be washed off, but with the design from the movie of it. And
I don't think, for all of M Night Shyamalan's many faults, he never does anything just for the money of doing it. Dragon Turtle. I have no doubt that in some weird corner of Night Shyamalan's mind, he thought he was doing a good thing. He just was thoroughly wrong, as occasionally happens with him.
I forget. Wasn't there some sort of thing with M Night, bad video game movies, the German government, and money?
No, that is Uwe Boll you're thinking of.
Oh yeah, that former what was it, boxer or something?
Yes, that decided to make a name for himself adapting video game movies, and for a long time people referred to him as the next Ed Wood. And he was so insulted by that he would offer to fight someone, and anyone who criticized his movies, he would offer to fight them in the boxing ring. But yeah, no, as much as the quality comparison can definitely be drawn between M. Night's Last Airbender and Uwe Boll's movies, M. Night doesn't do bad movies because of money. He does them because his creative sensibilities just sometimes don't work.
Yeah. I don't really have much to say besides what I just said. It looks fine. Nothing really I'll be fully honest, nothing really stands out, which kind of could be a bad thing, but I'm so far remaining neutral.
Again, I really want to like this, but
it's the little thing.
I have such doubts, and I can't look. Again, I'm generally of the opinion of if you can't do it right, don't do it at all. So we shall see. I'm not opposed to this because again, it could be much, 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 much worse. Look at Cowboy Bebop. Look at Death Note. Look at the M. Night Shyamalan version. So it could be worse.
I would hope that it takes a lot more inspiration from the One Piece live action show.
I think we're all hoping for that. Please, for the love of God. But also, on the one hand, I don't really trust the original creatives behind Avatar much either in this case, because they are the sort of people who got so far up their ass they decided to literally do the opposite. Cough, cough, Korra, and that didn't
Were those
work.
the
So
original people?
yes,
Oh, okay. I
they
didn't remember.
their literal premise was let's do the opposite of what we did in the last one. And I will
Well,
maintain until my dying breath that when you do the opposite of something that is timeless and iconic, why were you expecting to do anything other than mostly forgettable shit?
anyway, shall we?
Yeah.
Cabbage.
Cabbages. My cabbages.
Right. There goes the savior of the world.
I chased down every hint of the Avatar. It's my destiny.
I will say I do like
Okay.
the soldiers' army.
Zuko,
Like
Zuko,
just-
Zuko does have the necessary intensity, and Sokka is endearingly
Fun.
silly. So
I do like
there's-
how they recreated the intro with like him hitting the lion statue
Mhm.
on the airball. That's funny. I admire that.
Yeah, I kind of hope they recreated the intro of the actual show too while we're at it, because there's absolutely no reason they shouldn't do it.
I do like the design here, though I wish it looks like the armor is just plain black with some red.
Yeah, little stylistic touches could have added a lot to this.
Yeah, because if I remember correctly, this was like the proto armor before we got like in like season 3 we got that newer armor look, right?
Mhm.
This that had like red outlines and like certain red details that helped it pop more.
Speaking of the Fire Nation army, are we getting Admiral Zhao again? It just
I-
now occurred to me to wonder about him.
Let me look. I'll look at the cast.
Because I mean, for the love of God, that first Agni Kai between Zuko and Zhao is badassery. Also, we kind of need Admiral Zhao, because if we don't get an Admiral Zhao, then that basically nerfs the entire Moon Spirit arc.
All right. Okay. Yeah. Commander Zhao's in here. Qin
Okay, good.
Leung, played by Qin Leung. I think
Okay.
that's his name, right?
That
I
works. That works. I was just like, please, like, obviously their main task was to get the main cast right, but I do want, like, the side characters of Avatar are really endearing, so leaving them out would be, which makes me wonder, are we ever gonna get, assuming this gets more than 3 seasons, or assuming this gets at least 3 seasons, are we gonna get a live action Hama? Because that's gonna be creepy as shit if we get a live action Hama.
I am. Oh, and they also have Jet as well.
Okay, good. Honestly, Jet is one that I probably could have seen. I could have dealt with Jet being left out, honestly.
All right. Although I am somewhat, there is the actor for Boomy is somewhat interesting.
Who did they cast as Boomy?
I'm gonna butcher this, so keep that in mind. Utkarsh Ambudkar. I think that's it. I'm fairly certain I butchered that, and I am terribly sorry.
I don't even know who that is, so I can't tell whether you butchered or not.
I'm sure you'd know his face.
Obviously, he's gonna have to be younger than his animated counterpart, because the number of old men that are in that kind of shape is minimal at best.
Right. Okay, let me.
What
go.
about speaking of White Lotus characters? What about Zhang Zhang?
Hold on. Um,
He might not be big enough to justify listing in the cast list, but still.
oh, George Takei is Co with a face stealer.
See, that works, but honestly, I would have rather George Takei play another character. Like I could have seen Takei as Roku. Though that mean they're not gonna waste George Takei, which means that Ko the Face Stealer is going to have a big-ish role in an episode or two. Which, yay, because god damn it, Ko was creepy. Who did they cast as Roku? Or I guess I should say, did they cast anyone as Roku yet?
Yeah, they did. I passed him while I was looking for. Give me a second. C.S. Lee.
Don't know him off the top of my head. Hope he's good.
Oh, he's a good actor. He was in Dexter.
Who did he play in Dexter?
God, what the fuck was he called? He was one of the lab assistants, the pervy Asian dude.
Okay, it's been 20 years, so I'm sure he looks older now, but that is he
I think
better act his ass off.
Yeah, he's been in other stuff, like more serious stuff, like serious roles, I think.
I am become skeptical. Who is Iroh?
Hold on. Give me a second. Okay. I'm looking. Paul Soo-hyung Lee.
I also don't remember him or know him from anything.
He was in Mandalorian. He was one of the Republic pilots.
I am not wowed yet, but I'm not discouraged.
He's a good actor.
I'm skeptical on the Roku casting. The Roku casting may in fact be an issue, but otherwise, I think they're all okay.
All right, hold on. Let me check the chat because I was literally on the other page. I was on the other tab for that. Okay. The other firebender, Jean. Dexter the serial killer. That's
Yeah. Dexter, not to be confused with Dexter's Laboratory.
Yeah. Anyway. Shall we?
Cabbages! My cabbages!
Yeah, you're a fucking nerd.
I'm not someone who can stop the Fire Nation. I don't want the responsibility.
You don't have to do this, Laurel. You have me, Tara, and a flying ball of fur. What more do you need?
Oh, Momo. I'm pretty sure they're using the exact same sounds for Momo as they did in the original.
Which
And
would be
God,
oh hey, look, it's May. What was her name? June.
yeah, the one the lady with the shoe.
Yep.
Yeah.
I'll be honest, I did not feel anything for her. Which is weird, I realize.
I mean, she was cute and everything, but she didn't leave enough of an impression to really say anything about.
Yeah.
She was just sort of generic tough girl assassin. Not of all of the people who have been commissioned to kill the Avatar, I think Combustion Man might be my favorite. I hope we see him
Yeah.
again.
No,
Of course,
it's
we won't see him for another couple seasons yet if we do see him, but still.
they're gonna have to get a big motherfucker for that.
Yeah, like I almost wonder if like John Cena or Dwayne Johnson would be willing to do it.
I was gonna suggest Dave Batista.
He would
He's
also be good.
I'll be honest, he's a far better actor than The Rock. And John Cena, as much as I love the guy, he has a certain niche of characters that he's good at playing.
Yeah, he's a little bit too charming to play
Yeah.
Combustion Man.
Well, the thing about
Wouldn't mind
Combustion Man,
seeing him as the Boulder though. If in season 2 when we get to Toph, if John Cena plays the Boulder, that would be funny.
that actually could work, yeah. But Dave Batista works, I think, because he is a phenomenal actor. Like, out of all of the pro wrestlers that have gone into acting, he is the one I can genuinely say is one of the best actors I have ever seen.
Yeah, he was really good, especially in Knock at the Cabin recently. That was the first time I really saw him play a seriously dramatic role.
There's
He was really good in that.
well, I'll be frank. I know you don't like the movie. I know you don't like Denis Villeneuve, but he was the standout in Blade Runner 2049. Like, there's a short with him that is amazing, and he had limited screen time in the movie itself, like in the beginning, obviously.
Mhm.
Yeah, he's just fucking amazing.
Yeah, I have very little recollection of that, but it's not Dave Bautista's fault. It's because I only watched Blade Runner 2049 once to review it, and I despise Denis Villeneuve. He doubles down on everything I dislike about Christopher Nolan's style of filmmaking, and the fact that they gave him Dune, but the Jodorowsky Dune went unmade just pisses me all the way off.
Right?
But
yeah, here in this shot, like with the background, if you notice, it is a little more, again, like nothing again, like maybe there's a choice, but I just feel like it could be a little brighter, you know? It's a bit desaturated for my taste.
And her look could also stand to be a little bit darker and more edgy. Like, I remember she had like tattoos and they.
No, she has them. She has them. It's on her. They're on her arms. You just can't.
Okay, well then, it's just a application issue. They didn't make them striking enough, I guess.
Well, like
But
you said earlier.
But this does mean we're getting the giant fucking mole creature.
I
The
think.
Shushu.
I don't know if it was in another. It was in like a quick scene or not, or we could. But yeah, I guess we are getting that, which I think you must find oddly adorable if you keep bringing it up.
One of my concerns with this show is how much of the actual scale of the universe of Avatar are we going to get? Because there are a lot of very unique and very specifically Avatar-ish creatures in the setting, and I do wonder how many CGI characters they have the money to make.
Fair enough. Clearly they have enough for Appa and Momo because you kind of have to because they're in.
Yeah, everything.
Yeah.
If they got one of those two wrong, I would be raging. But I think Momo made the transition better than Appa did, maybe. But then again, we also haven't seen much of Appa yet, so I will reserve judgment. But yeah, we get the Shushu, and when we get to season 2 and get to the Earth King, I expect Bosco.
or someone, at least have the cabbage merchant there. Like I think cutting him out would not work.
Also, speaking of settings that are going to be really, really taxing to do with CGI, wonder how they're going to handle the swamp come season 2.
Anyway, shall we?
Yes. Cabbages, my cabbages.
The world needs you. Remember what it is we're really fighting for. The ones we love.
I'm the Avatar, and I'm gonna save the world.
Alright, so we're getting Blue Spirit 2, which is good.
Yeah. Excuse us, folks, but this is probably going to be mostly a checklist of things. Okay, are they doing this? Are they doing that? Are they doing this? Are they
Well,
doing
it's just
that?
like
'Cause-
even with all like the god damn it. Given a lot of stuff happens in season 1, even with the small adventures.
Mhm.
I'm not sure, and given how many episodes Netflix usually gives a show, which is usually what, like 13 on average.
Well, closer to 10 usually, but they had better fucking roll out the red carpet for this show.
Right, but I'm just saying, like, I'm curious what they'll have, like, what they would have to, given the limitation of episodes.
Well, this is the problem of Avatar, because almost every aspect of Avatar is, at least in the first iteration, fuck Korra, but in the first iteration of Avatar, almost every episode or every plot thread was iconic. So you can't really skimp on most of it. You can get rid of, like, for example, the giant koi fish. You can get rid of you might be able to get rid of the Serpent's Pass episode in season 2. You might be able to get rid of the pirate episode with the waterbending swirl. There are like one-off episodes like that you can get rid of. But
Although-
pretty much everything else plot focused, you have to keep, because otherwise you'll be missing something
Well, Dylan,
that is actually indispensable.
Serpent's Pass, I will make somewhat of an argument to keep, because while it's not plot focused, it is character focused, and it had a lot of character development for a lot of the characters.
This is true, but in terms of, like, time and budget allocations, I could easily see them cut it out. I could also see them leave out the Appa getting abandoned or taken plot line. It would be a pain to, but I could see them get rid of it, because if they get rid of that, then that keeps everything focused on the main characters more.
Mhm.
Then
I don't know.
again, they might keep it just because that is a plot thread that's really beloved.
It's a weird dichotomy on the fact that so much, even like one-off stuff, does have a lot of stuff that adds to the larger narrative.
Yeah, so much of Avatar is iconic that you can barely bring yourself to part with anything. Like, for example, come season 2, if there is no Guru episode, then I will burn things.
Oh, that you'll burn for, but not Appa being taken or
Appa being taken is emotionally cathartic and everything, and is crucial to Aang's, like, growing up aspect, but it also is a massive diversion. So I would rather they cut out the Appa bit than cut out anything that happens in Ba Sing Se, because
that's fair, actually. Well, what about stories of Ba Sing Se?
I mean, they have to, although they probably will. They have the benefit of probably being able to reference Lu Ten and Iroh losing his son more consistently throughout this than they did in the original. So
Yeah.
they might be able to soften it just a little bit. But
Well, I honestly
we all
would.
know that as soon as the Soldier Boy song comes on,
Oh God.
we're all
Oh,
going to
oh,
weep.
shut up! I don't want to think about that song, man. Shut the fuck up.
God damn it.
Oh God.
Every time.
Fuck, man. Like every fucking time that thing gets me. Even thinking about it. Fuck.
That and Iroh's other song, the Winter, Spring, Summer, and Fall one, that one also always gets me.
God, I don't remember that one.
That's the one that he sung during the Storm episode.
Oh, fuck.
Winter, spring, summer, and fall. Winter, spring, summer, and fall.
I have to rewatch The Storm.
4
at some point.
seasons for love. 4 seasons for
All right.
love.
So with the Blue Spirit, it is very evident that they are going to possibly do the Storm episode or combine. I honestly also could see them combining some episodes to save time.
Yeah, like again, I think most of what they're gonna do is leave out some of the one-offs and keep to the cathartic plot or in character focused episodes. So they'll definitely do this. My question is, will they do the episode with Heibai that first introduces Heibai, the forest spirit? Because they kind of need to set up the spirit world, but
Yeah,
then again,
I
they
don't know.
also might not.
Anyway, shall we?
Yeah, cabbages, my cabbages.
Cabbages.
God damn, that cabbage merchant better have had a happy ending at the end of all that. I think this is the part from the Air Temple episode. I don't think this is during. I don't think this is during the Northern Water Tribe. I think this is. I think this is meant to be his first Avatar
Yeah,
State incident at the
I
Air
think
Temple.
yeah, because they're. I mean, yeah, the lighting and stuff and the
The
setting.
surroundings look more
Yeah.
Air Temple-y than they do Water Tribe-y to me. But
Yeah. I get it. Anyway, it's like roughly 20 seconds left, so nothing. Nah, I'll be honest. I mean, shall we talk about the bending and how it looks? Because I don't think
yeah,
I don't think it looks bad. It's certainly an improvement over the other live action.
you're right. But I think the issue is they didn't focus heavily enough
On the
on.
martial arts.
Well, yeah, the martial arts and the choreography, the gracefulness of bending. That was always what stood out to me the most, and I don't think I'm alone in that. Is the gracefulness of the bending.
Yeah, that's completely fair, actually. Yeah. So, mm. The effects, and like I mentioned, the effects aren't bad. You can clearly tell that they're, it's very much CGI.
Hmm.
Um,
But yeah,
it's again, it's not bad.
this looks okay, but then again, this was also their money shot, so this was the shot that they had to have ready for the trailer.
Yeah.
Otherwise, someone would have cut off their heads probably.
Shall we?
Yeah.
Cabbages.
Cabbages, my cabbages.
February 22nd.
Hmm. And of course, we are going to review this when it comes. Well, maybe not when it comes out. Probably first week of March.
I only remember the Secret Tunnel song chorus.
You, sir, need to watch Avatar again, Because if you somehow have managed to make it to your adulthood without weeping and gnashing your teeth at that Soldier Boy song, then you have homework.
Mm. Okay, since it is almost 12, I do think we are called there, folks. Again, I'm on the fence about it. I could go either way.
Yeah, I want to be optimistic. I will try, but it again. I would rather they have waited until CGI had caught up to the point that they could do it than
To be fair, the weird thing is, I do think there are some fan films and short films that have done bending. Not, I wouldn't say it looks better, but I think there is certainly a visual style to it that makes it work.
like it's very clear that someone is trying. It's just it doesn't seem like everyone was trying, and that's sad.
Anyway, like I said, with that, folks, I want to say goodbye, adios, aloha, auf Wiedersehen, sayonara, peace, cheers, and
Shalom and fuck off. We will burn things if there's no cabbage merchant.